House of the Dragon Season 3 has finally come to an end, in what is probably the most banger season of this Game of Thrones prequel series so far, a series which drops some massive bombshells and reveals on us, such as the Helaena Targaryen dream sequences, the secret eggs of the dragon Dreamfire hidden within Harrenhal, as well as the shocking reveal of the apparent origin story of Alys Rivers, the season climaxing with the dramatic bloody battle of Tumbleton and the betrayal of Ulf the White. Hello you beautiful nerds, I'm Finn, welcome back to Finn Films. As many of you probably know by now, I am a huge Song of Ice and Fire fan, a massive fantasy geek, and just overall Game of Thrones nerd. We've done a ton of Game of Thrones content on this channel, most recently with my deep dive on the character of Alys Rivers, as we attempt to separate fact from fiction on this very ambiguous character. So that is why today we are breaking down and explaining everything from House of the Dragon Season 3. I'm talking all 8 episodes, every little detail, reference, and Easter egg to Game of Thrones, Fire and Blood, and just a Song of Ice and Fire lore that you may have missed while watching this season. This is going to be a long one, so strap yourselves in. This is House of the Dragon Season 3, Explained. The episode opens as we see Rhaena in the Vale attempting to claim the wild dragon known as Sheepstealer. Now, we know that this is a major change from the book series, where Sheepstealer is claimed by a dragon seed, aka a bastard with Valyrian blood, named Nettles. But Rhaena, we see, manages to calm the beast, mounting it as it takes flight. Rhaena more along for the ride than actually flying the dragon. Unlike many of the other dragons we have seen in this series, Sheepstealer has lived its entire life in the wild, and thus in many ways it is a feral dragon, having not grown up with the other dragons on Dragonstone or around humans in general. As such, it is erratic in behavior and does not really listen to commands, as we will see play out in the climax of this episode. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, Aemond has discovered that his brother King Aegon has fled the city, being escorted away by Larys Strong. Aegon, if we remember from the events of Season 2, was attacked and badly burned by Aemon and Vhagar. Aemon, one-eyed, we see, is about to behead the Grand Maester when he learns that Larys Clubfoot is also missing, the prince connecting the dots. As he sees that this is likely another one of Larys' schemes, however, this is an opportunity for Aemond. His older brother Aegon has essentially abdicated the throne, this making him king. Meanwhile, we see Larys and Aegon being stopped on the road by soldiers, this possibly being in the Crownlands, these soldiers here appearing to bear the symbols of House Staunton. These men, though, are sworn to the Blacks, as they demand that Larys and Aegon swear their allegiance to Queen Rhaenyra, or die. These soldiers obviously not knowing that the burned man in front of them is the literal king. Aegon, of course, being the headstrong, proud prick that he is, fails to do so, which forces Larys' hand, the man outing the burned man as the king of Westeros, Larys managing to convince these soldiers to take he and the king to Dragonstone alive, as they are more valuable as hostages. Meanwhile, in Dragonstone, Rhaenyra is going over the offer that she received from Alicent in the climax of Season 2. If we remember, Alicent told Rhaenyra that Aemond and his massive dragon Vhagar will be at Harrenhal, and she will allow Rhaenyra and her dragons into King's Landing, basically handing over Aegon to her, ending the war. Alicent being willing to end the war to betray her family in order to save her children. We see that Rhaenyra very much believes Alicent, while her son Jace counsels her against it, Jace obviously still angry about the death of his brother Luke at the hands of Aemond. Of course, we know that Alicent's offer actually is genuine, but her plan has very quickly gone awry with Aegon fleeing King's Landing, this forcing Aemond One-Eye and his massive dragon to stay in the capital. Rhaenyra, though, is completely unaware of this as she readies her troops and her dragons to depart for King's Landing in 2 days' time. In King's Landing, we see Alicent has returned from her quick little trip to Dragonstone, as she is informed that the king wishes to see her. Alicent believing the king that is being referred to is her son Aegon, only to be surprised when she is led into the throne room to see her younger son Aemond sitting the throne. A look of horror crossing her face as she realizes should Rhaenyra actually take her offer, she will be led right into a trap. Aemond having assumed the throne as King Regent as he plans to bide his time, as he informs his mother that Lord Ormond Hightower and 15,000 men are marching with his younger brother Daeron Targaryen and his small dragon Tessarion, and that the Triarchy fleet will soon be ambushing the Sea Snake and breaking the blockade, this leading to the Battle of the Gullet, the climax of this episode. Meanwhile, in the Riverlands, we see Daemon Targaryen along with the Tullys and the other River Lords having laid waste to the Lannister hosts, as they are even joined by the Northern Men, Lord Stark's Greybeards, who have slain Lord Lannister. Criston Cole, the Hand of the King, meanwhile awaits the arrival of Aemond and his dragon, as Aemond was supposed to arrive outside Harrenhal days ago. We see Criston here is painting a shield with 10 black dots, this being the arms of House Cole, Criston, we know from the source material, was common born, so he is creating his own arms for his newly formed house after having the named Hand of the King. We then flash over to the 3 dragon seeds, Ulfhew and Adam of Hull, the brother of Alan of Hull. Rhaenyra, we see, has stationed the dragon seeds near Harrenhal, as they are awaiting to ambush Aemon One-Eye and his massive dragon whenever he arrives. The dragon seeds, of course, are accompanied by their new dragons, Silverwing, Vermithor, and Seasmoke, respectively. Vermithor is one of the oldest and largest of all of the dragons alive at this time, this dragon previously belonging to King Jaehaerys. Ulf is lamenting and thinking back on how sad and horrible his life was up until this point, as things have changed drastically for these 3 bastards, as being dragon riders has made them essentially some of the most powerful people in all of Westeros. A random person becoming a dragon rider is essentially like playing Russian roulette. It's like handing a common person on the street a button that can launch a nuke at any time, and hoping that they act responsible with it. And out of all of the dragon seeds, it is very obvious that Ulf is ultimately out for himself. We then see Sheepstealer abandon Rhaena on a mountaintop, the dragon refusing to obey her as Rhaena desperately tries to fly it back to Dragonstone. Though Sheepstealer later returns, having brought a sheep for Rhaena to eat, as it seems that it does acknowledge her as her rider in its own strange way. Over in King's Landing, Alicent is writing a letter. We can see that she has signed this letter in her son Aemon's name, as she speaks to her daughter Helaena, the young woman telling her mother that Aemon is frightened just like her, as Aemon knows that if he has to face Rhaenyra and her dragons, that he will likely die. The queen then summons a knight, ordering the letter to be delivered to Sir Ormond Hightower and his vast host, stating that this letter contains the king's instructions, Alicent making bold moves and taking risks in an attempt to set things right should Rhaenyra come to King's Landing. As if it isn't obvious, this is not the king's instructions, this is Alicent's instructions, to which she forged the king's signature. Over in the Gullet, we see Corlys speaking with his bastard son Alan, this being a very awkward conversation, as we see Corlys is trying to mend a bridge that has been broken for 30 years, as he offers Alan a drink from the faraway island nation of Ib. Ib being the second largest island in the known world of A Song of Ice and Fire. Corlys in this conversation thinks back on Alan's mother, at how he did fancy her and care for her, and he did his best to provide a life for them. Though, as Alan rightly points out, Corlys did not provide them with a name, as he and his brother Adam still bear the bastard name of Hull. Their conversation is interrupted though by a warning bell, as Triarchy pirates have been spotted approaching the blockade. Corlys, we know, has been fighting the Triarchy for years over control of the Stepstones, Corlys' arch-rival being Admiral Shirako Lohar. In the HBO series, Lohar and the Tyroshi pirate Rindoon have been merged into one single character, played by actress and YouTuber Abigail Thorne, better known online as PhilosophyTube. According to interviews done, the character Lohar in the show is inspired by Ricalio Rindoon, a devious Tyroshi captain who has a dozen wives and likes to dress as a woman. Again, this character being combined with the Triarchy pirate Lohar. The most important thing, though, about this character is that she has a deep hatred for Corlys and wants to destroy him and claim his home of Driftmark, as we see that the Battle of the Gullet has now begun, Lohar ordering a part of her armada to split off to sack the castle of High Tide, Lohar having used Lord Lannister for her own purposes. Back on land, though, we flash over to Lord Ormond Hightower and the Hightower host, along with Daeron Targaryen's little blue dragon, Tessarion. Ormond is the head of House Hightower and is Alicent's cousin, the man receiving the letter that was written by Alicent, but it was obviously signed in King Aemon's name, Ormond being amused at learning that Aemon is now king. The letter telling him to make camp there and await Aemon's arrival, as he will join them in 3 days' time. So Alicent, we see, has continued with her secret plan to get Aemon out of King's Landing. Ormond is depicted as a smart, intelligent, scheming man. A man wearing glittering, beautiful silver armor who carries a bauble of incense with him to save him from the horrible smells of shit that surround him. Ormond, as well, we know, wields the Valyrian steel sword Vigilance, which we can possibly see depicted here on his hip. Next to Ormond is a man known as Bold John, or Sir John Roxton, head of House Roxton. In the books, John wields the black Valyrian steel sword Orphan Maker, which we possibly see on his back here, both of these men playing an important role in the Targaryen Civil War, the Dance of the Dragons. Back in King's Landing, Alicent attempts to manipulate her son Aemon, playing on his fears of Rhaenyra and her dragons, as well as his desires to be king. Alicent pleading with Aemon to go to Harrenhal, a castle which in her words survived Dragonfire once already, so he will be safe there. This being a reference to the fact that Harrenhal survived an attack from Aegon the Conqueror. However, we know Harrenhal has a complex history with fires, as in this series we already saw Lord Lionel and his son Harwin die in a mysterious fire. Aemond is somewhat suspicious of his mother, but she is also telling him all of the things that he wants to hear, so he ultimately agrees to depart to Harrenhal, but not before, in an extremely awkward scene, kissing his own mother. As we can see that Alicent is truly scared of her son. Meanwhile, outside Harrenhal, again we see the dragon seeds have grown restless, as they see a strange creature with goat legs and antlers walking upright. This again playing with the information that many of the forests outside of Harrenhal and the Godswood of Harrenhal itself are haunted. Ulf is terrified and very much wants to leave this place. The group are then interrupted by Alys Rivers, who informs them that they are actually missing the battle, that their queen has need of them in Dragonstone. This is obviously not a complete lie, as the Battle of the Gullet is currently raging. Alys Rivers here we see in the show very much is a freaking witch, as how could she possibly know this except for magic or possibly a glass candle? However, we have already seen in the series that Alys very much manipulates people and she uses them to her own ends. Alys, in one of my favorite scenes of this episode, declaring she is a witch.
Who are you?
I'm a witch.
Right, look after yourself.
Back at Dragonstone, Baelor returns from a scouting mission informing Rhaenyra that Corlys' fleet has been attacked and there is war in the Gullet. Rhaenyra deciding that she will ride her dragon out into battle. Her son Jace, though, protests this as he doesn't want his mom to take such a risk. Jace ordering a Kingsguard to bar her inside for her own safety. As he mounts up on Vermax heading out, Baela accompanying him on Moondancer. Later we see Rhaenyra in fury and anger destroy her riding coat, this riding coat being a kind of symbol of her gender. Meanwhile, we see that the Battle of the Gullet is raging. Corlys not wanting his ships to cluster should friendly dragons join the battle. The Triarchy flagship, the Bitch Fist, has been sighted. Corlys orders to turn his ship towards them, as he knows that Lohar's anger and lust for revenge toward him will cause her to act erratically. Lohar doing exactly as Corlys predicts, as she orders her flagship to pursue Corlys' ship. Lohar having used the Lannisters and the Greens to get revenge on the Sea Snake. We see that the battle has turned towards the Black's favor when Jace and Baela arrive, their dragons laying waste to Triarchy ships. Corlys ordering his ship to head through the Dragonstone Pass in order to draw Lohar out. The Dragonstone Pass being a narrow, shallow channel of water that only a skilled sailor can navigate without running his ship aground. We see though that Lohar and her fleet have come prepared though as they ready the grapnel, a large harpoon which is attached to a heavy weight. As she aims the weapon at the dragon, hitting Vermax, the weight sinking deep into the water, causing the smaller dragon to sink down towards the sea. However, Baela and Moondancer manage to save Jace and his dragon just in time. Corlys meanwhile leads Lohar through this narrow pass using his vast naval experience and his knowledge of these waters to navigate it without any issue. Meanwhile, we see Lohar and some of her ships aren't as lucky, many of them running aground. Lohar in this moment though betrays Lord Lannister and his men as her ship manages to follow Corlys' ship through the narrow passage. Meanwhile, we see Rhaena atop Sheep Stealer, the girl managing to have steered the wild dragon towards Dragonstone. As to her horror, she sees the Battle of the Gullet raging down below, as she decides to take Sheep Stealer and lend aid. This is a change from the source material, as in Fire and Blood it is reported that Jace was accompanied by the 4 dragon seeds in the Battle of the Gullet, but we see that this has changed somewhat for the series, for the show. It makes sense as well that the pirates would come equipped to handle and fight dragons, as they did face Daemon atop Caraxes. Sheepstealer then enters the battle, but again, this dragon is not like the others. It has been wild its whole life, and is never actually seen combat. As such, Rhaena is unable to control it, as it begins attacking all ships, even friendly ones. Jace and Baela, seeing this new large dragon entering the fighting, assume it must be an enemy. Meanwhile, we see Lohar has managed to catch up to Corlys, the sea snake turning, seeing his home of High Tide set aflame, the man's mind going blank. As we know that his home means more to him than anything, especially after the death of his wife Rhaenys. This forcing his bastard son Alan to take command temporarily as the two ships collide, a melee ensuing. Lohar and Corlys ultimately engaging one another in battle, the two again having a deep hatred for one another, as the Valyrians and the Triarchy have been fighting each other for over 20 years. In the chaos, Corlys is thrown overboard. Assuming the worst, Alan calls out for his father. This being a big character moment for Alan, who actually is acknowledging that Corlys is indeed his father, a secret that he has kept his entire life. As we have seen multiple times, Alan being forced to shave his head to avoid growing the signature Valyrian blonde hair. Alan then charges Vohar seeking revenge as he manages to kill her, but this victory feels hollow, as we see all of the death and destruction all around them in the Battle of the Gullet. Meanwhile, Bela charges in, pursuing Sheepstealer on Moondancer, not realizing that it is her sister atop this rogue dragon. However, the tide quickly turns as Sheepstealer begins hunting Moondancer. Sheepstealer again not listening to Reyna as it pursues the smaller, more nimble dragon. Jace then dives in, ordering Vermax to help. Jace realizes that it is Reyna atop the large dragon as he manages to lure it away. Sheepstealer being hit by multiple projectiles, deciding that it's had enough of this fight as it leaves. Jace, though, we see has flown too low to the water and too close to the ships, his dragon being hit by another grapnel. The small dragon being immediately pulled down towards the sea. This time, though, Moondancer is unable to help, as it can only watch on helplessly as the other dragon is pulled down beneath the waves, ultimately dying. Jace managing to float to the surface as he grabs a bit of wood, where he is then shot dead by Triarchy pirates. The deaths of both Vermax and Jace being extremely accurate as to what was written in Fire and Blood, and thus the scene earlier with the grapnel was a bit of foreshadowing, especially for fans of the book series. As well, yes, the Blacks have technically won the Battle of the Gullet. At what cost? There has been massive death tolls and destruction on both sides. The Valyrian fleet has been crippled. Rhaenyra has lost yet another son, the Crown Prince, along with his dragon, as the tide of battle in the Dance of the Dragons continues to shift back and forth from black to green, as House of the Dragons Season 3 Episode 1 comes to a dramatic end. The episode opens as we see the aftermath of the Battle of the Gullet, the ocean being littered with destroyed ships belonging to both the Triarchy and the Valyrian fleet. While Rhaenyra's forces may have won this battle, we can see that it was extremely costly. Their fleet is in ruins, Driftmark is burning, as well Jacaerys the Crown Prince is dead along with his dragon. As we see multiple dragons flying over top of the gullet, the dragon seeds Ulf, Hugh, and Adam having arrived. Meanwhile, a tearful Bela has retrieved Jace's body as she carries him back to Dragonstone, his body being presented to his mother, Queen Rhaenyra, who is in shock at seeing yet another one of her children dead before her. Out in the gullet, we see Alan has been searching for his father, Lord Corlys, amongst the carnage, not knowing if the man is alive or dead. He is later joined by Bela, who has faith that her grandfather is still alive. For some context, Alan and his brother Adam are Corlys' bastard sons, so technically they would be Bela's uncle. Bela having been informed by Adam that they are actually Corlys' secret bastard sons, so they are all related. Alan then asks Bela about her relationship with Corlys as he wants to know more and understand his father better, Bela telling him that the man loved his wife like no man she has ever seen, and it was for her sake that he tried to forget Alan and Adam, the two relating with one another and getting a laugh at how proud and stubborn Corlys could be. As we know that the true character motivation for both Alan and Adam is to be accepted by their father. In the skies above, we see that Adam atop Sea Smoke is also searching for Corlys, as they do manage to find him alive, washed up in the shallows. Later, after Corlys has recovered, the man sits with his sons and granddaughter as he looks upon his home of Driftmark, which is ablaze, saying that if this was a victory, he hopes he never sees another one. It being plain and obvious that Corlys does not feel like the victory in this battle was worth it, the Lord then turning to Alan, telling him he has nothing more to offer him now except his name. Alan stating that this is worth to him more than a mountain of gold, as Corlys in this moment is basically saying he will legitimize both of his bastard sons, allowing them to claim the name of Velaryon, and making the brothers legitimate heirs to Driftmark, making them lords. Specifically, Alan in the HBO series is named heir to Driftmark. Now, there have been a number of kind of small changes here in regards to the brothers Adam and Alan in the story, in the books. Adam is actually the older brother to Alan, but it very much seems like this has been switched in the HBO series. As such, in the books and the story, it is actually Adam who is originally named heir to Driftmark, though this right ultimately does pass to Alan. Meanwhile, we see that Rhaena has fled to the Vale, pleading with Lord Aaron for asylum and safety after the events in the Gullet, where she could not control her dragon Sheepstealer as it ended up attacking many of her own allies. Lady Aaron informing the girl that Jacaerys the Crown Prince is dead, Rhaena blaming herself for what has happened. And while she believes that no one saw her atop the dragon, she knows that Queen Rhaenyra will still have her and the dragon hunted. Rhaena then makes a deal with Lady Aaron. She will stay in the Vale to provide the land protection. In return, she has a place of asylum and safety. Over in the Riverlands, we see Daemon, the Rivermen, and the Northmen are celebrating their victory over the Lannisters, as together they drink and sing of how their enemies have been turned to fish feed. Simon Strong then arrives bearing a gift of wine as well as a message from the Queen. The celebrations being cut short as Daemon learns of Jace's death. Daemon is then summoned back to Dragonstone in order to claim the Iron Throne, as he orders his primary host of men to head towards the capital to meet him there. Before Daemon leaves, though, he speaks with Alys Rivers, who demands a steep reward for providing the Queen with 40,000 Rivermen, as she wants Harrenhal. something that Daemon views as impossible as Alys is common born, this angering Alys who tells the Dragon Lord to never return to this place again. Over to King Aegon and Larys, who we see find themselves caught up in the skirmish on the coast between their captors and the Triarchy. The king seeing this as an opportunity to escape as he does not heed Larys' advice, stating that they are going to Rook's Rest where Criston Cole has a garrison. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, we see that Aemond has left to join Cole atop Vhagar, wanting to claim Harrenhal, as his mother Queen Alicent begins to put her plan into action, as she knows that Rhaenyra will be coming to claim the throne soon. She speaks with the leader of the Goldcloaks, Commander Largent, informing the man that Rhaenyra is returning, and that Queen Helaena will be relinquishing the city to Rhaenyra. Alicent needing to know where the Goldcloaks stand, as at this point they are the largest force in the city. Back in Dragonstone, we see Daemon has arrived, chastising the Dragonseeds Ulf and Hugh for abandoning their hunt for Aemond and Vhagar. As we will see later in this episode, if they would have stayed at Harrenhal, they ultimately would have confronted him. But because they are gone, Aemond is able to claim Harrenhal with no fight at all. Daemon, we see as well, still has an issue with Mysaria and how she has seemingly wormed her way close to the Queen. Daemon not trusting the woman, thinking her a schemer who is working to her own ends, as they all then learn that Aemond and Vhagar has indeed left King's Landing. Daemon then goes to his wife Rhaenyra in an attempt to comfort her, learning that there was another wild dragon sheep stealer with a rider at the Battle of the Gullet, Rhaenyra holding this rider responsible for Jace's death, as the queen believes this dragon rider must have been for the Greens, as she orders Daemon to ultimately find them and kill them. Of course, we need the audience know that this rider was in fact Rhaena, a top sheep stealer, which is Daemon's daughter, so it sets up a rather awkward reveal and potential confrontation in the future of our story. Daemon then tells his queen that Vhagar has left King's Landing, so now is the time to act. Daemon informing her of what he saw at Harrenhal, the vision of the Song of Ice and Fire, the prophecy that Viserys revealed to his daughter in the first season, the darkness in the north, a vision of a woman with silver hair with dragons at her chest in a desert far away. This woman with silver hair, as the Game of Thrones fan know, is Daenerys Targaryen. So then, if this prophecy is real, if it is true, then they must act quickly to claim the throne and set it into motion, this being the motivation that Rhaenyra needed in order to act despite the great grief that she feels. As later we see she has donned the armor and vestments of a king, as she sets out with her many dragons to claim King's Landing, Rhaenyra having regained her steel as she orders the death of her Kingsguard Sir Lawrence, sitting astride her dragon Syrax as she is accompanied by Daemon on Caraxes and the other 3 dragon seeds. Alicent then continues to work to put her plan into motion, finding her daughter Helaena, who he sees examining a caterpillar, the queen finding this odd, as this is not the season for these caterpillars to be alive. Now in the HBO series, we have seen that Helaena is gifted with some kind of foresight or visions of the future, whether that be dragon sight, green seeing, or something similar. So whenever Helaena speaks, we know that they aren't simple throwaway lines. As in the Queen's journal, we see a drawing of a butterfly as well as a written passage, the passage stating this: "These butterflies are said to cause death to people around them while they are living," an ominous set of foreshadowing for events to come in our story. Alicent, though, has no time as she grabs her daughter, informing her that Rhaenyra is coming and that they are going to flee, but first she needs Helaena to use her power as the queen to order the guards on the battlements to stand down. Alicent realizing in the past she made a great mistake by having Aegon become king, as she wants her daughter to live out a happy life, as she believes she is the only child she has left that she can redeem. Helaena and Alicent then successfully ordering the guards atop the battlement to stand down. Meanwhile, at Rook's Rest, Cole and his forces witness Aemond atop Vhagar flying above, as Cole orders all of them to ride to Harrenhal. This being where Aemond is going, as we see the bats of Harrenhal fleeing the castle. The bats we know later in the future will become the symbol for House Lawston, who held the castle until the reign of King Maekar when they were cast down, as we watch Aemond and his massive dragon Vhagar lay waste to Rhaenyra's forces that were left to garrison the castle. Aemond then descending down from his dragon, entering the castle sword drawn with his new set of badass armor. The man wielding the legendary Valyrian steel sword Blackfire, the symbol of the king, as well as the cat's paw dagger. 2 weapons that he doesn't wield in the story of the book series, but it does kind of make sense why Aemond of all people would be wielding the legendary blade of Blackfire, especially after his brother King Aegon abdicated his throne. Aemond then makes his way to the castle, cutting down soldiers, finally heading to the Grand Hall where he confronts Lord Strong and his family. Lord Strong attempting to negotiate with Aemond to hand the castle over willingly. These scenes very much mirroring when Daemon claimed Harrenhal in the previous season. However, Aemond, unlike Daemon, is more prone to violence and letting his temper get the better of him, as the Dragon Prince cuts down Lord Strong and the rest of his family, though he is stabbed in the back in the process. The man turning, seeing Alys Rivers standing before him. the prince collapsing from his injuries as he pleads with the woman for help. King's Landing, we see Rhaenyra arrive with her dragons, Alicent having kept her word as they are not attacked, the dragons being able to land, as we see Alicent and Helaena attempting to flee the city in disguise. Rhaenyra and Daemon dismount as they make their way into the castle. Daemon wielding Dark Sister in hand, striking down a number of the guards that were still loyal to the Greens, in an awesome, very Kill Bill-inspired scene. They make their way to the throne room as Rhaenyra looks upon her destiny, the Iron Throne, as she is this close to claiming it. However, a member of the Kingsguard and a host of his men confront her, the last remaining bastion loyalty to King Aegon. Suddenly, though, Rhaenyra and Daemon are surrounded as behind them enters in the Gold Cloak Force, Daemon seeing their leader, Sir Luther, who Daemon once led as Lord Commander of the City Watch under his brother, King Viserys. Sir Luther declaring that the Gold Cloaks stand for their one true queen, Rhaenyra. As Rhaenyra has finally done it, she has claimed the city, claimed the throne, as she orders that Aegon be brought to her. However, they soon discover that the king has fled the city with Larys Strong. The Grand Maester, fearing for his life, pledges his loyalty to Rhaenyra, the man offering up Lord Jasper to die in his place. Down in the dungeons, Daemon is made aware of a special little gift that was apparently left by Lord Strong for him. As to our shock, we see that Otto Hightower is still alive, having been kept deep down in the dungeon below King's Landing. Lord Jasper and Lord Hightower are then presented before Rhaenyra being shocked to see that Otto is actually still alive, the man believing that if Rhaenyra is here, then everyone else must be dead. Now, if King Aegon was here, Rhaenyra would have taken his head to show what happens to usurpers. As we know from the cycle of violence that Game of Thrones and the House of the Dragons enacts, that in order to lay claim to the crown, one must eliminate all of their enemies and all those who might make a similar claim. However, because Aegon is gone, Rhaenyra is unable to do this, so she must enact her revenge in some other way, to show the people that she is a strong ruler who deals with traitors. As Otto will stand in the place of King Aegon, Rhaenyra having to be the one to do the deed, as in this moment, when she strikes him down, she will become queen. Otto telling Rhaenyra that if her father could only see what is to come, he could never have imagined it. This being somewhat ironic, seeing as it was Otto and his daughter Alicent who set the events of the Dance of the Dragons into motion by scheming and putting Aegon on the throne to begin with. Rhaenyra, wielding Daemon's Valyrian sword Dark Sister, swings down at Otto, but she misses, the sword being lodged in the man's back. However, with her second attempt, she manages to behead him. Otto, just like in the books, being the first of the traitors to die, just as he predicted. Daemon then quickly doing the same to Sir Jasper, as Rhaenyra on shaky legs ascends to the throne, claiming her destiny. I freaking love this shot here where we see the reflection of Rhaenyra climbing the throne steps in Otto's blood. The episode ending off in a dramatic twist and climax as Alicent and her daughter Helaena are then brought before Rhaenyra in the throne room, having been captured, trying to escape. Alicent looking on in shock at seeing the body of her father beheaded before her. Rhaenyra also can only look on in shock and horror at her friend, with tears streaming down from her eyes, as House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 3 comes to an end. The episode opens as we see Daemon is meeting with Lord Ormond Hightower and his massive host of men. As well, we see the smaller blue dragon, Targaryen, amongst Lord Ormond's ranks. This dragon we know belonging to Prince Daemon Targaryen, the youngest son of Queen Alicent and the half-brother to Rhaenyra. Daemon having been sent at the age of 6 to ward with Lord Ormond Hightower, so at this point in our story, he has spent more time with Lord Ormond away from King's Landing than with his own mother and siblings. This scene as well is also used to illustrate the sheer power and might of dragons in Game of Thrones. On one side, we see Ormond accompanied by his great host of men, a massive army, along with a dragon, though a smaller dragon. Then on the other side, you see Daemon Targaryen, standing alone, only for the camera to pan back to see the man being flanked by his own dragon Caraxes, along with Hugh and Ulf, mounted atop Vermithor and Silverwing. As these three men, with their fully grown dragons, are enough to make a host of thousands of men surrender. This being the true might and the power of dragons. Daemon informs Ormond that Rhaenyra sits the Iron Throne, and that in his words, the war is now over. The Queen with her mercy having offered clemency to Ormond and his army if they swear allegiance to her, though Ormond doubts that Daemon is telling the truth. However, Daemon tells the man that his uncle Otto encountered this truth very personally, extremely recently, as we know from the climax of Episode 2 with the beheading of Otto Hightower. Lord Ormond then, for the sake of the lives of his men, draws his Valyrian steel sword, Vigilance, as he declares his allegiance to Queen Rhaenyra. Daemon then throwing in one last curveball as he demands that his nephew, Daemon Targaryen, Lord Ormond's ward, be given over to him as he will be coming back to King's Landing. as we see a silver-haired boy around the age of 15 is presented to Daemon. While we won't learn this until later on in the climax of the episode, this is in fact not Prince Daeron, but a common boy, who has been dressed up with his hair dyed to look like the prince. Ormond, knowing that since Daeron had warded with him for so many years, it's likely that no one would recognize what the young prince looks like now, as Lord Hightower had no plans to hand over one of the heirs to the Iron Throne so easily. But again, this plot will not be discovered until later on in the episode. This whole plotline here with the fake Daeron being given over to Daemon is a change from the events in Fire and Blood, but it basically accomplishes the same outcome with some more classic Game of Thrones scheming and curveballs involved, so because of that, I don't mind it. In fact, I really like it. Back in King's Landing, we see Rhaenyra is settling into the castle that she grew up in, having moved into her father's bedchambers. Rhaenyra remembering what it was like being a girl in the castle, memories of her father when he was strong before his sickness took him. This line here by Rhaenyra, that her father was stronger back then, is kind of a bit of an homage to a classic line by Robert Baratheon.
He came running at me, this dumb, high-born lad, thinking he could end the rebellion with a single swing of his sword. I knocked him down with the hammer. Gods, I was strong then.
Rhaenyra is then planning her coronation, as we watch her walk through the halls of King's Landing. In the background, we see many servants working to remove all of the symbols of the Greens from the castle, replacing them with the symbols of Rhaenyra, the Blacks. Rhaenyra is planning on having a grand coronation, this to her being a symbol of legitimacy, a thing that Rhaenyra craves, in order to seal her place on the Iron Throne as her father's heirs. Rhaenyra, as we will come to see throughout this episode, is obsessed with this idea of legitimacy. Daemon then arrives back at the castle, introducing Rhaenyra to the fake Daeron Targaryen, her half-brother, though again at this point they believe this is the real Daeron, as Rhaenyra has him imprisoned in a room. Daemon wants Rhaenyra to kill the lad as he stands as a claimant to the throne, so he is a direct threat to her, but we can tell from Rhaenyra's face here that she doesn't want to do this. They then head to the small council where the Grand Maester is telling Lord Corlys about the state of the city, specifically the treasury, which is quite empty. Lord Lannister having divided the gold and sent it out of the city for safekeeping, meaning that the treasury is depleted, the crown is, for all purposes, broke. This means that Rhaenyra will not be able to hold her grand coronation to symbolize her legitimacy, but the new queen will soon see that this lack of gold will lead to much greater problems. The Grand Master stating that if anyone would know the location of this missing gold, it would have been Lord Jasper, the Master of Laws, but we know from the previous episode that Rhaenyra had him killed. The realm is awash with many problems. Triarchy pirates are causing mayhem throughout the kingdom, the granaries of King's Landing are empty, the planting season is a month away, and the people are starving. The Balerian fleet we know from the Battle of the Gullet is in ruins, so trade routes cannot be established quickly to get food. So a solution needs to be found, and found quickly. Mysaria warning that a hungry population is a dangerous one. This being some rather ominous potential foreshadowing for this story, Rhaenyra demands that tribute be taken from all of the great houses in order to raise funds for the city. She then learns that Aemond has claimed Harrenhal and slain the Castellan Lord Strong, but Aemond has since disappeared along with his dragon. Daemon inquiring about Alys Rivers, though the Grand Maester knows nothing of her. Rhaenyra wants Aemond, Vhagar, and Sheepstealer found, as she believes these are the greatest threats to her throne. Again, Rhaenyra still doesn't know that it was actually Rhaena, a top Sheepstealer, at the Battle of the Gullet. The castle as well we see is overrun with rats after King Aegon had all of the rat catchers killed, after the events of Blood and Cheese. Rhaenyra then leaves, making her way through the castle where she heads to Alicent's room. Rhaenyra then asks Alicent about the location of the gold, but Alicent knows nothing about it. She also knows nothing about the location of Aegon or what has happened with Aemond. Alicent, for all of her shortcomings, having done everything she could to uphold her end of the bargain, as Rhaenyra does now sit the Iron Throne, and she has claimed it with little bloodshed. Alicent tells Rhaenyra to declare that Aegon is dead, as no one knows what he looks like after he was scarred. As Rhaenyra knows, in order for her to solidify her claim to the throne, she needs to eliminate all other claimants, chiefly being Aegon, who was crowned king. Rhaenyra, though, refuses to allow Alicent and Helaena to leave, confining them to the castle. Helaena pleading with Rhaenyra as she doesn't want to be imprisoned there. This line being a bit of foreshadowing for things to come, which we will be discussing at length in the spoiler section. Rhaenyra then takes Alicent's advice and has it declared that Aegon is dead. As well, she orders that her son Joffrey be brought to King's Landing from the Vale, to be raised as her heir. Joffrey being her last surviving son from her first marriage with Laenor Velaryon. Rhaenyra then meets with the High Septim as she needs to be anointed by the faith as part of the image of legitimacy. However, this is something that the High Septon can't do, as Aegon was only very recently anointed and declared king, and until Aegon is proven dead, the faith cannot appoint another in his place. This angering Rhaenyra, as again, she needs the legitimacy provided by the faith to be seen as the rightful queen. The High Septim, though, chastises Rhaenyra, telling her that the faith does not deal in dragons, that dragons are creatures of sorcery, darkness, and destruction, that they only destroy, they do not create, and that there is no good that can come of them. The man advising Rhaenyra to not make an enemy of the faith. Again, this being some not-so-subtle foreshadowing that we will be discussing in the spoiler section, as well as being a bit of kind of an homage to events that happen in Game of Thrones with the faith. Obviously, there is a lot of symbolism in the High Septim's words in these conversations. We know that dragons are essentially metaphors for nuclear weapons in Game of Thrones. Dragons, we know, are symbols of power, they are symbols of destruction, and symbols of the Targaryen household, who use them to conquer all of Westeros. As we saw in the opening scenes, the might of men can do nothing in the face of a dragon, but we know from Game of Thrones, as well as A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, that the Targaryens' reliance on dragons, and the use of them to seal their power over the people, will be part of their undoing. Later, Rhaenyra speaks with Corlys alongside his bastard sons Alan and Adam. Corlys admitting to Rhaenyra that they are indeed his bastard children, but he wishes for them to be legitimized, and for Alan to be named heir to Driftmark, but only the crown can legitimize them officially and then grant them the name Velaryon. Corlys pleading with the queen to do this, as now Alan and Adam are his only heirs, and should Corlys die, his name will die with him. Rhaenyra, though, we can see is hesitant to do this for Corlys. This will come to a head later on in the episode. The next day, Rhaenyra sits on the throne, seeing the people who will petition her, the small folk telling her of their many plights, such as the lack of sheep due to many being taken to feed dragons, as well as the lack of meat and food for the people of the city. Rhaenyra offering the use of the Kingswood, which is an affront and a breach of norms, as the Kingswood is the private hunting area for the king of the realm. This idea from Rhaenyra coming from a good, kind-hearted place, but it is seen as a potential insult to her forebears. As such, she declares that small game such as rabbits could be taken from the Kingswood, but not stags nor boars. This line coming directly from Fire and Blood, but it was originally uttered by another character, the Squire Trystane Truefire, but in the HBO series we see it was given to Rhaenyra, which in this context does make sense. A woman named Sylvie then approaches the queen asking for justice for what the common folk have suffered, as the nobles of King's Landing have been hoarding goods and food since Rhaenyra's blockade was put in place. Back to the small council, Baela has been sent out to search for Vhagar and Sheepsealer, but she has found nothing. Rhaenyra is currently in a bit of a bind, as she is trying to figure out how to handle the position of the small folk, Mysaria believing that these people should be helped, while Daemon thinks that this is simply the way of the world. They shouldn't blame the rich people for the problems. Mysaria then asking the queen what her father would do, as she believes she would hold a banquet. Later, Rhaenyra meets with the Dragon Seeds, Adam, Ulf, and Hugh as they are to be knighted. As they are now to bear titles, they will need names for their houses, with Ulf choosing the White after he is chastised for wanting to take the Targaryen name, Hugh choosing the Hammer, which makes sense as he is a blacksmith, while Rhaenyra declares that Adam be named Adam of Hull, signifying that at this time she will not be legitimizing Corlys' sons, a choice that again will be explained later in the episode. As we watch Daemon then knight the three men amongst the gathering wreckage of the Greens. The three men then swearing their allegiance to the crown, but we can tell that Ulf is not very impressed by this simple ceremony as payment. Hugh after this stops Rhaenyra, asking her about what sort of living he might expect now in King's Landing. Hugh's wife having fled the city to go and live with her brother in Tumbleton. Rhaenyra telling him to send for her, and that they will set aside a house for him on Visenya's Hill, though Rhaenyra is unable to promise when exactly this will happen, seeing as the crown is lacking funding. This again setting things into motion that will take place further along the line in our story, and we will be discussing in the spoiler section. Rhaenyra and Alicent then meet again, where Alicent apologizes and asks that her father's remains be sent to Oldtown. Rhaenyra, having experienced the weight of the crown firsthand, asks Alicent how she dealt with it. Alicent telling Rhaenyra that ruling the kingdom changes a person, that she will at times have to turn away and let people suffer and die, that she will do things that she thought she never could have imagined. However, Rhaenyra refuses to accept this idea. Later we see Rhaenyra hosting a feast for the nobles of King's Landing, Rhaenyra taking this moment to chastise the nobles as they are presented with a dinner of cooked rats, the food that the small folks have been forced to resort to after the nobles have been hoarding provisions. Rhaenyra informing the nobles that as they speak right now, their homes are being searched and that provisions are being confiscated, that they will be given out to the people of the city. Rhaenyra in this moment making enemies of many of the lesser houses of King's Landing. She then speaks with Lord Torrhen Manderly, who finds this situation very amusing. Fans of Game of Thrones will recognize House Manderly as one of the northern houses. The man thinking this was a bold move played by Rhaenyra as he attempts to get on her good side, as we will be seeing more of Lord Manderly in future episodes. Later, Rhaenyra tells Daemon to go to the Vale to speak with Lady Arryn to demand gold as tribute. This setting up a potential meeting between Daemon and his daughter Rhaena, a top sheep stealer who we know is hiding out in the Vale. Daemon, though, believes that Rhaenyra should cease dealing with the petty squabbles of King's Landing, as Aegon the Conqueror took Westeros with only 3 dragons. Rhaenyra, meanwhile, has 6, thus the world is there waiting for her to take it. Dorne, Essos, the Free Cities, all of it. As we need to remember, at this point in history, Dorne has yet to be conquered and made part of the 7 Kingdoms, which technically are 9 kingdoms, as is pointed out by Egg in Knight of the 7 Kingdoms. Daemon believes that with the powers they wield, they are essentially gods, as the Targaryens were always meant to be, this being the dream of old Valyria. However, Rhaenyra knows that the dream of old Valyria ultimately led to their doom, the doom of old Valyria, which destroyed the entire way of life of the Dragon Lords. All of these Dragon Lords dying except for the Targaryen ancestors who fled and came to Westeros. Rhaenyra in this moment remembering her father's words that there is a level of power that is too much for a single person to bear. Later that night, Rhaenyra goes to Daemon's room, but she is unable to follow through with killing him. The next day, Rhaenyra goes before the common folk, handing out provisions to them in front of the Great Sept of the Faith of the Seven. These provisions, again, we know were taken from the noble households, though we know these provisions are not enough to solve the lack of food problem in King's Landing. It is merely a token gesture meant to win the people's favor. Later, Corlys confronts Rhaenyra about her unwillingness to legitimize Adam and Alan, Corlys having given everything to Rhaenyra and has asked her only for this favor in return. Rhaenyra states that she can't do this, especially considering the rumors which abounded her own sons. As if we remember, Rhaenyra's sons, Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey were all rumored to be born from Harwin Strong. And seeing as Joffrey is her current heir, she cannot be seen to be raising up illegitimate children at this time. This angering Corlys, who calls Rhaenyra's sons all bastards, as we see that tensions are beginning to boil over in King's Landing, Rhaenyra having spurned one of her closest allies, Corlys Velaryon. Rhaenyra then speaks with Alicent, telling her that her son Daeron is in King's Landing. As Rhaenyra doesn't want to kill the boy, she declares that he will be sent north to the Wall to take the Black. As we then flash over to Daeron's room, Alicent coming face to face with the boy, which she immediately looks on in shock, as this is in fact not her son. The young man then admitting the farce, that Lord Ormond put him up to this and dyed his hair, and sent him there disguised as Prince Daeron. Later that night, Rhaenyra is informed that there is a dragon keeper at the gate, the man telling her that Ormond's Hightower host has taken the town of Tumbleton in the Reach, the place that was mentioned earlier where Hugh's wife is currently residing. Rhaenyra in anger wants to burn the city along with Ormond and his host to the ground, but she knows that the people are being held hostage, so if she did this, she would be killing many innocents in the process. As behind Rhaenyra, we see the colors of the greens that have been gathered all throughout the episode are then set ablaze, as the episode ends off in a dramatic climax, setting into motion the events of the Battle of Tumbleton, as House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 3 comes to a dramatic end. Episode 4 opens as we see the town of Tumbleton moments before Ormond Hightower's forces claim the city. Tumbleton, we know, is a mercantile town in the Reach that sits near the borders of the Crownlands, the Reach being one of the regions of the Seven Kingdoms, such as the North or the Stormlands, for example. Tumbleton is said to be around 60 leagues southwest of King's Landing. A league, for context, is around 3 miles, and Tumbleton sits at the headwaters of the Mander, a great river that runs through the Reach, this making it an ideal place for being a trading hub, but not an ideal place for a battle fortification. This we will see later very much confusing Rhaenyra, as she doesn't understand why Ormond would take Tumbleton of all places. We then watch the massive Hightower host lay claim to the city, soldiers barging their way into homes, as we see Hugh the Hammer's wife, who we learned from the previous episode had traveled to Tumbleton to stay with her family, and 3 soldiers forced their way into their home. This setting up an important point of confrontation for this episode and for future events in future episodes. You see that Lord Ormond has set up in the home of House Footley, House Footley being the lesser noble house that controls the town of Tumbleton. Lord Footley we see is a mousy man, while his wife on the other hand is much more fiery and to the point, the woman taking issue with Ormond taking over their home and sleeping in their bedchamber. Ormond stating his purpose is to restore the rightful line to the Iron Throne, but we will come to see that Ormond is not referring to Aegon or Aemond when he references the rightful line, but Alicent's youngest son, his ward, Daeron Targaryen, who we see is with him here, Ormond seemingly having dyed Daeron's hair brown, concealing his golden white Targaryen locks, Daeron being raised more like a Hightower than a Targaryen, Ormond almost treating him like his own son. And as we will come to see, Ormond has taken any opportunity he can to teach Daeron lessons and prepare him for the possibility of becoming king, as this is in fact Ormond's grand master scheme. Lord Ormond receives a raven from Storm's End, Ormond having requested aid as the Baratheons have technically declared for the Greens by having one of the Lord's daughters marry Prince Aemond, as if we remember this was the actual catalyst for the death of Lucerys above Storm's End at the hand of Vhagar. But it seems like the Baratheons have reluctance to actually join any of the fighting, much to Ormond's anger. Ormond also has received no word from Harrenhal from Prince Aemond, as Ormond knows that they will need a dragon in order to guarantee their defenses. Over in King's Landing, Rhaenyra is confused and baffled as to why Ormond would want Tumbleton. As we have discussed, Tumbleton is a market town with no real defenses. It provides little strategic value, so it makes no sense why he would want to take it. Rhaenyra believing that he is daring her to rain dragonfire upon the town. This would in fact kill many of the innocents who are being held there. Rhaenyra stating this would make her Maegor returned. This referring to King Maegor the Cruel, a Targaryen king who dealt with a faith militant uprising and crushed it with brutal force and a reign of tyranny. Ormond, as we will come to learn, fancies himself a scholar, being familiar with history, and specifically the story of King Maegor. This making sense as Maegor's first wife was Cersei Hightower, one of Ormond's ancestors. The Grand Maester suggests an alternative course of action. Instead of sending dragons, they should have Daemon's Rivermen host divert to Tumbleton to fight. Rhaenyra agreeing with Orwell's plan, appointing the man to her council. Rhaenyra also decides to send a dragon to keep watch over the city, an important plot point we're going to be coming back to later. We see that Corlys Velaryon, the Hand of the King, is missing, as if we remember, Rhaenyra offended him in the previous episode by not granting his sons Adam and Alan legitimacy. Rhaenyra then naming Lord Manderly the Master of Coin, as they will need someone to scapegoat to blame for the lack of gold in the city. Rhaenyra then questions Alicent about Ormond, what she knows about him, but Alicent knows very little. She states that the man sees himself as a scholar, a studier of history, this again making sense from what I mentioned earlier. This also makes sense because Old Town, the city of the Hightowers, is home to the Citadel, the home of the Maesters. The Citadel being where new Maesters are trained and is regarded as the hub of knowledge in all of Westeros. Old Town as well also containing the Starry Sept, the church that for 1,000 years was the home of the High Septum. Old Town in many ways being the spiritual ancestral home of the Faith of the Seven, before the conquering of the Targaryens. Alicent also mentioning that when they were young, Gawain believed that Ormond was a cruel person. Alicent also telling Rhaenyra one key detail, that Ormond has a strong sensitivity to smells, something that we have seen over the course of the episodes, this being why he carries a censer of incense and good smells with him at all times, something that Rhaenyra could possibly use to her advantage in the future. We then see that Corlys is leaving the city. In his words, he wants to serve his queen more effectively, as he sends Adam to serve in the court in his stead, this being a great opportunity for Adam to prove himself and better himself. We move over to Aegon and Larys, Aegon having found the body of his dragon Sunfire. The scarred king breaking down, unable to believe that his dragon is actually dead. We also see that a group of ruffians have taken to charging people to touch the dead dragon, Larys having to pull Aegon away from the dragon in order to avoid suspicion of who they really are, as they continue their journey to Rook's Rest. We see Criston Cole's forces making their way to Harrenhal as they encounter the burn marks and the carnage that was left behind by Aemon and Vhagar when he claimed the castle. They enter Harrenhal but find no one there except for Alys Rivers, who informs them that Prince Aemon and his dragon are no longer there, after learning that Rhaenyra has taken hold of King's Landing. This being very much news to Cole and Gawain, who had no idea about the events in King's Landing. Alys, we know, is obviously playing games with Cole, and she knows much more than she is letting on, as the woman has her own schemes that she is working in the background to accomplish. Gawain then advises Cole to join their forces with Ormond and Tumbleton, but Cole refuses, as Cole has everything to lose should the Green lose the war. The man declaring he will wage guerrilla warfare on Daemon's Riverlord army in order to try to prevent them from reaching King's Landing. Back in King's Landing, Rhaenyra finds her father's life work, the model of Old Valyria that we knew Viserys had spent his life constructing, that Aegon destroyed in a single moment. Rhaenyra stating that this was a reminder by her father that even great dynasties fall. She is then joined by Adam of Hull, who tells the queen that his father Corlys has left the city to lead the fight against the Triarchy Raiders. Adam offering Rhaenyra some advice and a solution to deal with their rat problem: cats. This is a minor change to our story, as Fire and Blood states that it was actually Otto Hightower who brought cats to King's Landing to deal with the rat problem. However, in the HBO series, we see that it is Adam's suggestion, a minor change, but we know one that is actually important and will have ripple effects to a Game of Thrones, where cats have become the go-to rat catchers in King's Landing ever since this moment. Larys and Aegon arrive in Rook's Rest, where they see the carnage and fallout of the Battle of Rook's Rest. Larys warning Aegon that the men who hold this city are likely only loyal to themselves. The two men are then forced to work in order to keep their identities hidden, Aegon having to work in the latrines, the once king of the realm driven to the lowest possible of status. Back in Tumbleton, there is a scuffle between Hugh's wife, her family, and one of Lord Hightower's men. Later, the family, along with Lord and Lady Footley, present the soldier to Ormond. Ormond listening to both sides of the story on what happened, ultimately siding with the Smith's family, having the soldier punished. This being an important lesson that Ormond wants Darren to learn, that they must keep a firm grip on the city and the lawlessness and disorder in check. In King's Landing, Hugh the Hammer speaks with Rhaenyra, wanting himself, not Ulf, to be sent to Tumbleton. Again, this makes sense. We know that his wife is there. Rhaenyra, though, did this on purpose as she wanted to send someone who has no stakes in the matter, but Hugh insists. Rhaenyra ultimately relenting that both he and Ulf shall take turns watching the town. This setting up events for future episodes that we will discuss in the spoiler section. Ulf is walking the streets of King's Landing when he comes across some graffiti, the words saying that the queen is the queen of bastards. Ulf then returning to the tavern and his friends that he used to frequent. Rhaenyra then speaks with the Grand Maester, wanting to know how much control the Hightowers have over the faith. This being much of the history that I mentioned earlier on in the video. The fact that the Hightowers fund the faith, built the Starry Sept, and that Old Town was once the home of the faith and the High Septum for 1,000 years before the Targaryens' conquest of the Seven Kingdoms. So the Hightowers are very much intertwined with the faith, though they likely don't control them. The Grand Maester then advises Rhaenyra not to remove the High Septum, as this could very much backfire and bring down the wrath of the faithful upon them. Over in the Eyrie, we see Daemon speaking with Lady Arryn as he demands gold for the crown. As the two talk in the throne room of the Eyrie, Daemon circling the moon door, this being an iconic set that many fans of Game of Thrones will recognize. Lady Arryn agrees to give Daemon the gold as we watch him mount Caraxes. Suddenly, though, the dragon disobeys him, taking him to a cave on a mountainside. Daemon walks forward, his Valyrian sword Dark Sister in hand, when he comes face to face with his daughter Rhaena, being flanked by her dragon sheepstealer. Rhaena, we see having cut her hair and is dressed in tattered robes. As I've discussed several times in these videos, Rhaena in the HBO series is very much taking the place of a character from Fire and Blood, this character being Nettles. Nettles in Fire and Blood was a low-born commoner dragon seed who claimed the wild dragon sheepstealer. And we can see here from Rhaena's new appearance that she is very much embodying this character of Nettles. A skinny brown girl on a skinny brown dragon. Rhaena explaining everything that has happened, how she claims sheepstealer and how she went to the Battle of the Gullet, and how she blames herself for Jace's death, the girl knowing that Rhaenyra is hunting sheepstealer and its rider. Daemon then pleads with his daughter to flee the kingdoms and leave the dragon behind, but Rhaena refuses to leave sheepstealer, as for all her life she has been alone, cast aside and forgotten, the Targaryen without a dragon. Now, though, she finally has her dragon, and she's not letting it go. She then asks her father Daemon to lie to Rhaenyra for her, in her words, the only thing she has ever asked her father for. The woman mounting her dragon, departing. Daemon is now in a difficult situation. Does he protect his daughter, but betray his wife and queen in the process? As the prince looks down, spying a lone goat herder on the mountainside below, a plan forming in his mind. Back over in Tumbleton, Ormond receives a letter from Harrenhal bearing the Hightower symbol. Prince Darren, seeing Ormond's mood change, tells a young servant boy to quickly leave, as we watch Ormond draw his sword, lashing out in anger, as we see a hint of the cruelty that Alicent mentioned earlier.
Daddy, chill.
The letter we learn was from Gawain informing Ormond that Aemon won't be joining them, and that Gawain and Cole's forces will also not be coming to Tumbleton, forcing Ormond to alter his scheme as he is now very much alone. Back in King's Landing, Rhaenyra learns that there was no communication between Ormond and Otto Hightower, leading her to believe that Ormond very much ruled Hightower like a kingdom unto himself, making his action and his schemes even harder to predict. She is interrupted by Ulf, who then asks her several small favors, specifically for some of his friends from the tavern. The Queen telling Ulf that a man of his station, a dragon rider, cannot be frequenting taverns like this in the city streets any longer, Rhaenyra restricting Ulf's freedom of movement, much to Ulf's dismay. Ulf then telling Rhaenyra of what he saw on the streets of the city below, specifically of the graffiti of the Queen of Bastards, Ulf then uttering a very ominous and foreboding line.
The work, I am sure, of some of your misguided subjects who mistakenly believe their queen to be unkind.
Rhaenyra in anger ordering the gold cloaks to take to the streets to find those responsible. Back in Rook's Rest, we see Larys informing Aegon that Rhaenyra has declared him dead, Larys believing this will ultimately work in their favor, and this will make Aegon's eventual rise from the dead to reclaim his throne even more dramatic. Daemon then arrives back in King's Landing, bearing the gold from Lady Arryn as well as a charred head. He declares he has brought justice and vengeance, this being the head of the goat herder that Daemon looked at before. Though it is charred and disfigured, Daemon declares that this was the rider of Sheepstealer. Daemon making a bold lie in order to save his daughter Rhaena. Mysaria, though, still suspects that Daemon is likely lying to their queen, as the war between Daemon and Mysaria continues to wage over who has more influence on Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra briefly meets with Alicent, telling her that her father's remains are being delivered to Old Town. After she leaves, Alicent then turns to her daughter Helaena, where in this scene, it is very heavily implied that Helaena is pregnant. This being an obvious issue, as if Helaena is pregnant, her baby would pose a risk to Rhaenyra's rule. Basically a rival claim, and it is very possible that Rhaenyra would try to kill this child. Again, though, we will be discussing more on Helaena and her future in this series in the spoiler section. In Tumbleton, Hugh flies over the town on Vermithor as we see his wife looking to the skies, this again being some not-so-veiled foreshadowing. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra's gold cloaks walk through the city streets, beating citizens looking for anyone to blame for the graffiti. In our final scene, we see Daeron speaking with his dragon, Tessarion, when he is interrupted by Ormond, the Lord of Hightower chastising his ward for showing affection to his dragon. Ormond wanting Daeron to be more of a Hightower, not a Targaryen. This very much being physically symbolized in the fact that Daeron's hair is dyed. Ormond we see has a deep hatred for Targaryens, referring to them as a savage race, poor in intellect but rich in cunning. Ormond believing that the Targaryens with dark spells created their dragons, in which they used to conquer the Seven Kingdoms. Ormond stating that the Targaryens stole what was rightly belonging to his ancestors. Much of Ormond's rhetoric here, specifically in regards to dragons, very much reflects what the High Septim told Rhaenyra in the previous episode, as we very much see the influence of the faith on Ormond Hightower. Ormond tells Daeron he believes the gods have put him here for a divine purpose, for him to sit the Iron Throne not as a Targaryen, but as a Hightower. This being Ormond's grand master plan, to have Daeron become king and restore the throne of Westerone back to its people, its rightful people. Again, Ormond seemingly having laid this plot, this scheme, for some time now, having Prince Daeron Targaryen brought up in the ways of the Seven, the ways of the Hightowers. As Lord Ormond then brings in the smith from earlier, the relative of Hugh's wife, the man being bound and in chains, as Ormond declares a righteous king must uphold many virtues, Ormond stating that he struck a man of the crown, so then he must be punished, he must pay with his life. Ormond handing the prince his sword, as we see that Ormond very much has manipulated the young prince to listen to him to do his bidding, as Daeron with shaky hands reluctantly delivers the blow, Tessarion then feasting on the body, Ormond declaring that now they will begin. As House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 4, the reveal of Ormond Hightower's master plan comes to an end. The episode opens as Daemon's army of Revermen and Northmen are attempting to make their way towards Tumbleton. However, their progress has been slowed by Criston Cole and his forces, who have been fighting a grueling guerrilla war, destroying every bridge on their path, attempting to slow their progress. The young Lord Tully deciding to play Cole at his own game, meaning that they will take part in similar guerrilla warfare tactics that we will see later in the episode. We then watch Lord Piper walk to his tent, re-emerging as he sees his guards dead, the man then being attacked and dying at the hands of Criston Cole, as we watch Cole's forces burn the encampment and then flee to the next crossing. We move over to Harrenhal as we see a band of rough men moving through the terrifying castle. Rhaenyra has put a bounty on Aemon's head, offering Harrenhal to any person who kills him. The men are then confronted by Alys, as we see this is not the first time she has dealt with such people. Alys leaning into her reputation as the Witch of Harrenhal, scaring the men by telling them the stories of how the castle was built, all the people who died in its destruction, and the death that surrounds this place at the hands of Harren the Cruel, the man who built the castle. Alys then tossing a rock behind her as a massive swarm of bats goes flying through the castle, leaving the men absolutely terrified. We know that Harrenhal has been completely infested with bats, so much so that Houth and Lawston, who later will hold the castle, would make their sigil that of the bat. Upstairs, we see Aemon awaken from a dream as he heard the screams and laugh of his brother Aegon, Aemon being haunted by what he did to his brother, as Alys attempts to comfort the prince, who we see she has hidden away in the castle and bandaged his wounds, Alys holding Aemon close like a child, as we see kind of the other side of Aemon here, not the cruel, powerful warrior and dragonlighter, but the lonely small child that he once was. Over in King's Landing, we see the Grand Maester making his way to Alicent and Helena's chambers. While he walks, we see that cats are being released throughout King's Landing. As in the previous episode, Alan of Hull gave Rhaenyra this idea to deal with their rat problem, after Aegon had all the rat catchers killed due to the events of Blood and Cheese. This, at least in the HBO series, is how King's Landing came to contain so many cats, though this is a change to the source material, where in Fire and Blood it was stated it was actually Otto Hightower who came up with this idea. The Maester then makes his way into Alicent's chambers, having lied to the guards to enter. One of Mysarea's spies seeing him do so, as we see that Orwell has brought Queen Helaena moon tea, as this episode confirms that Helaena is in fact pregnant. Orwell doing this favor for Alicent, though he tells her this is the last thing he can do for her behind Queen Rhaenyra's back. Alicent desperately tries to get her daughter to drink the tea, as if the baby is born and it is a boy, it will be a direct threat to Rhaenyra's crown, meaning she's going to have to get rid of it. But Helaena refuses to listen to her mother. She also tells her mother that Aemond is in Harrenhal, as she has seen him in her visions. In her words, Aemond is burning there, but burning without a fire. This referring to the mental suffering and torment that we know that Aemond is going through. We then see Rhaenyra speaking with Lady Frey from House Frey, as we see that the Queen has offered her a place on the council. However, Lady Frey is not pleased, as Jacaerys had offered her Harrenhal in exchange for allowing Rhaenyra's Rivermen army to cross the crossing. However, Rhaenyra has gone back on her word. As we know, she has promised Harrenhal to whoever kills Aemond. House Frey, we know, has lusted after Harrenhal for years and will continue to do so even after the Dance of the Dragons, as we know from Game of Thrones. In the council, Adam and Baela bring Rhaenyra sightings of Vhagar near Windish Town, a town in the Riverlands, as Lord Manderly quietly whispers to Lady Frey, informing her of the dynamics of the small council. Daemon tells Rhaenyra of a skirmish in the city at the Dragon's Gate, as 2 gold cloaks have been left dead in Flea Bottom. Rhaenyra, though, seemingly only cares about Aemond and Vhagar, as well learning about Ormond's plan. Rhaenyra ordering Baela and Adam to return to the Riverlands, as Rhaenyra barely looks or even acknowledges Baela's existence after the death of Jacaerys. The council meeting then dissolves into chaos, Rhaenyra chastising Daemon in private for so boldly speaking out against her. Daemon advising Rhaenyra to put aside Aemon and Vhagar and focus on the lawlessness and the chaos within the city. They are then interrupted by a servant who informs Rhaenyra that her son and her heir Joffrey has arrived in King's Landing. Over to Larys and Aegon, who we see are in the woods. Aegon is absolutely obsessed with seeking revenge on his brother, so much so that he is willing to walk 100 leagues to Harrenhal to try to find him. Aegon, in his own words, blaming all of his miseries and misfortune on his little brother. Back in King's Landing, Mysaria confronts Alicent, knowing that Orwell brought her something, as Alicent produces the moon tea. The Queen Dowager attempting to lie, saying that it was actually for her. Alicent then drinking the tea in order to sell this lie. With the tea gone, then, this means that Helaena will have to keep the baby. We then flash over to Criston Cole's forces as Gawain tells Cole about his life growing up in Old Town, how he and Ormond used to run the tower. Gawain saying that Ormond, even as a child, was a thin-skinned poor loser, and so he would often let him win. The High Tower in Old Town being the castle and home of House Hightower. The tower is said to be the tallest structure in the Seven Kingdoms, even taller than the Wall, and is also said to be the tallest tower in the world. However, technically Castle Rock, the home of the Lannisters, is actually taller. Gawain offering Criston a place to serve at his side, though we can tell by Cole's reaction he isn't too keen. They are then interrupted when one of their horses steps on a caltrop, as it seems the river army have gotten ahead of them and have begun laying traps, using similar guerrilla tactics, just as the young Lord Tully said he would. Back in Flea Bottom, we see Daemon with the commander of the Gold Cloaks. The mood amongst the Gold Cloaks is very poor, but Daemon believes if he leads them, they will follow. Their conversation is then interrupted by shouts as they rush to the voices, finding 2 more Gold Cloaks slain in broad daylight. As we watch a young girl rushing to a bird keeper, seemingly informing him of the news, the man then sending out a message, which we see then arrives in Tumbleton to Lord Hightower. The message reading this: "Gold blood spilled, 3 marked in the tally. The account is open." We can interpret this as meaning that 3 Gold Cloaks have been killed and that their account is open to be paid. As we can put together that Ormond is behind this scheme to take out Gold Cloaks and cause chaos within King's Landing, sowing distrust among the common folks, fear amongst the Gold Cloaks, and just overall chaos. Ormond, we see, is attempting to fortify Tumbleton as quickly as he can, but again, this is a hard feat as this town was not made to be a fortification. Daeron Targaryen is there with him, the boy sitting at a Savas table. Savas, we know, is a sort of Westerosi chest, which is mentioned numerous times in the book series, but this is actually the first time the game is making an appearance on camera. Ormond questions the boy about his studies, as Daeron is being taught the history of his ancestors, specifically the history of House Hightower, Ormond wanting the boy to repeat what he has learned. As Daeron speaks of the historical conflicts of House Hightower, between House Greyjoy, House Peake, House Garner, House Osgrey, and even House Dane of Dorne. Fans of Game of Thrones will probably easily recognize House Greyjoy, the Lords of the Iron Islands, as well as House Dane, one of the most notable Danes being Arthur Dane, the Sword of the Morning, who granted knighthood to Jaime Lannister, Arthur wielding the legendary blade Dawn, which was said to have been made from a falling star. Ormond then questions Daeron about what he has learned about Marya Martell, who he refers to as the Yellow Toad of Dorne, Marya being the Princess of Dorne during the invasion of Aegon the Conqueror, the only person who successfully managed to repel the Targaryen conquest, Dorne being the only region of the Seven Kingdoms that still has its independence, and we see that Ormond has some begrudging respect for the woman despite his sexist beliefs. Ormond respecting her tactics, her military mind, and how she stood up against the Targaryens. Marya swearing that Dorne will never be unbowed or unbent, this being the title of the episode, and will ultimately become the Martell words. Ormond then sits down as he begins playing Savas with Darren while he continues to speak. The Lord telling the boy the story of how Marya poisoned the wells and hid her people away when the invaders came, and used her cunning mind to outwit and defeat a much more powerful force. This being the lesson that Ormond wants Darren to learn. Ormond himself obviously taking lessons from this story, as we can tell from his scheming. The mood then shifts in the scene when Darren deploys his dragon in the Savas game, the dragon being the most important piece in the board game, this move causing Darren to win the game. Darren, sensing the anger in Ormond, pleads with him, telling him that it was just luck that he won, as Ormond in anger flips over the board. As if we remember earlier, Gawain hinted at this, saying that Ormond was a thin-skinned person and hated losing. We then watch Lord Hightower compose himself as he implores Darren to never apologize for victory. Ormond then presenting the young Targaryen with a gift, as he has had minted new golden dragons, the highest currency value in Westeros, emblazoned with the likeness of Darren Targaryen as king. This gold being a very physical symbol of opposition to Rhaenyra's rule. Ormond believing that Darren is the king that the Seven Kingdoms have been crying out for since the Targaryen conquest. Back in King's Landing, we see Helaena playing with her daughter Jaehaera in the garden. Helaena not letting her daughter touch a caterpillar, as she says they feast on nightshade, meaning that they are poisonous. This is not the first time we've actually seen these caterpillars, as they were referenced in Helena's book several episodes prior, as when they become butterflies, they are an omen of death. Alicent then comes and speaks with her daughter, telling her that they will be needing to leave the city, that she has traded her Star of the Seven necklace to a servant girl who will help them escape, as they can head out the secret passage that Blood and Cheese use, the one that resides in Baela's bedchambers. Helaena, though, doesn't want to leave her daughter Jaehaera behind, even as Alicent tries to explain how Jaehaera will be safer here, Helaena seeing right through her mother, knowing her tics when she lies. Back in Harrenhal, Aemond awakes from a dream of Vhagar, Alice telling Aemond that Vhagar is gone, having left him, the prince feeling lost and worthless without his great massive dragon, the symbol of his power, as Aemond believes he was nothing without his dragon. As if we remember in Season 1 when Aemond was a child, in many ways he was nothing until ultimately he claimed the massive beast. Alice, though, we see is attempting to console the man and repair him. Aemond learning about King's Landing, how it has fallen to Rhaenyra, and that his brother Aegon has been declared dead. Aemond, though, we see is still haunted by his brother. Aemond, as a child, we know looked up to his older brother, but we also know from Season 1 that Aegon regularly tormented Aemond and was cruel to him when they were boys. Aemond always feeling that he was second best to his older brother, that their mother loved Aegon more, and that he was her favorite. We then flash over to Aegon, who in a fit of rage blames all of his problems on Aemond. In Aegon's mind, Aemond was the talented one, the smart one, the prodigy with the sword, and he thinks if only he had been born with the advantage and the gifts that his brother had, he would have made a great king, this being ironic on multiple fronts, as we see the very interesting juxtaposition of the relationship between these two brothers, how they both envy each other for different reasons, and both think that their mother loved them more. Aemond again envying their mother's love for Aegon, and hating how cruelly Aegon treated him when they were children. Aegon envying his younger brother for his natural talents. Aegon also believing that their mother loved his younger brother more. Larys, we see, has heard enough, as he chastises Aegon for always whinging, telling him that he had every advantage available to him, but he squandered his birthright away, and is an absolutely terrible man, as he leaves him there behind. Back in King's Landing, Daemon finds Rhaenyra praying at the Holy Sept, telling her that more and more gold cloaks have been found dead in the city, that there is a hidden plot moving against them. Rhaenyra admitting that Daemon was right, that they need to focus on the city and root this out. Rhaenyra, we see, despite claiming the Iron Throne, her birthright, is going somewhat mad at the problems that present themselves to her, as the weight of the crown is growing heavy on her head. We see that Cole and his forces have abandoned their mounts and are making their way through the brush, which has caused them to lose precious time. The morale amongst the men is low as Gawain attempts to persuade Cole to reason, however Cole doesn't hear him as he continues to press forward, as they continue to push on to Stony Sept, only to find that the bridge for the river crossing has been destroyed. Tully's men have gotten ahead of them and have outplayed them, meaning their mission has come to an end. Back in Rook's Rest, we see Larys strong alone. Aegon then joins Larys, finally listening to him, as to their shock, they are also joined by Lord Lannister, who we see has survived the Battle of the Gullet. In King's Landing, Alicent and Helaena prepare to escape, disguised in servants' clothes, but they are stopped by Mysaria, who knew of their plans all along. Mysaria then discovering that it is actually Helaena who is pregnant. Alicent attempts to play on Mysaria's ego of her time as the White Worm, the woman who would play all sides. Alicent also playing on the division between Mysaria and Daemon. telling her that Rhaenyra will one day cast her aside for Daemon at the end of the day. Alicent begging with Mysaria, telling her that if she says nothing, she will earn the favor of the Hightowers, should a time come when she is in need of it. Helaena in this moment demands to go outside to see the moon, but she is unable to do so, as the woman hates being confined to this small space, this being a bit of foreshadowing as we watch her gaze at the nightshade caterpillar in a cage, the one that she warned her daughter about that was apparently poisonous. Back in Harrenhal, we see a group of Iron Island men coming in search of Aemond, these men climbing the stony walls that leads to the top of the castle near the weirwood tree. Alys confronts them, but these men aren't afraid of her as they attack. Aemond, though, comes rushing out to her aid, wielding the Targaryen Valyrian steel blade Blackfire, as he cuts all of the man down. Aemond now fully healed, his vigor restored. Back in Rook's Rest, Aegon and Larys are discussing what to do, Lord Lannister wanting to smuggle Aegon back to Castle Rock, but Larys wants to take their scarred king to Braavos. We then watch the leader of Rook's Rest discovering Aegon's crown, this revealing Aegon's true identity, but the king then lunges into action, plunging his dagger into the man. Back in King's Landing, the Gold Cloaks are in disarray at the death of their comrades, many feeling these works were not done by a man or even a group of men, but an evil spirit. Daemon then attempts to rally them with a speech promising them rewards and riches. Most of them we see are convinced by this, but a few aren't. However, Daemon is then informed that a man has been captured who might have some answers. Daemon, in this interrogation, learning that the man was paid to take out Gold Cloaks, though we never saw the man's face who paid him. The assassin being informed that he acted in service of the king, specifically King Daeron Targaryen, as the man was paid with the gold that Ormond had minted bearing Daeron's face, as Ormond's plan has finally been revealed. Daemon then informing Rhaenyra of this news, showing her the coin and that Ormond has declared Daeron king. Daemon being angry as he believes they should have burned Tumbleton and all of those within it when they had the chance. Our final scene then is a kind of montage scene, as over the top of it Cole delivers a speech to his men, the speech being more of a prayer to the gods of the Seven. In this montage, we see Helaena and Alicent stumble upon the hidden entrance to Maegor's tunnel in the room they are staying in. This, we know, was Rhaenyra's room as a child from Season 1, and we actually saw her use these tunnels to explore the castle. These tunnels we know being built by King Maegor I, and they snake their way all throughout the castle. All the while, Cole continues his speech, but we see that Gawain and his men have decided to abandon the party. Helaena and her mother push through these tunnels, coming to a blocked section, Helaena dropping their candle as they are now stranded alone in complete darkness. Meanwhile, Daemon stumbles upon a trail of blood, which leads him to the Gold Cloak quarters. Inside, Daemon is shocked to see the captain of the Gold Cloaks along with many of his men, now dead. The words, "A feast for traitors," written in blood above their bodies. These words also being a little bit of an homage to the title of the Game of Thrones book, A Feast for Crows, all of this referring to death. As Daemon again can only look on in shock, as a severe blow has been dealt to the Gold Cloak forces, as House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 5 comes to a dramatic end. The episode opens as we see the remnants of Criston Cole's forces, the men discovering a group of Rivermen soldiers who seemingly died in a battle. However, before Cole can put two and two together, they are suddenly hit by a surprise attack, as we see these Northern and Rivermen were playing dead, the group jumping into action as a battle ensues, Criston Cole wielding his signature Morning Star. Cole and his men ultimately emerge victorious in a super bloody scene, thinking that they have won the battle, only to find themselves surrounded on all sides by the Northernmen and the Rivermen. Cole striding forward as he asks Lord Tully to spare his men if he yields, but the young Lord Tully and Roderick Dustin refuse, Cole then accepting that he will die on the battlefield. This being what Cole has been searching for this entire time, to finally have control to his own end and his fate, to control his destiny, as we watch him take out the handkerchief that Alicent Hightower gave him before he set off to war. Cole demanding an honorable battle as he challenges both Lord Tully and Roderick Dustin. Suddenly though, Cole is then shot by multiple arrows, as we watch the man fall to the ground dead, the knight and hand of the king dying like a common soldier. This being a pretty shockingly accurate scene to what was told and depicted to us in Fire and Blood, even down to much of the dialogue. Though in the book, the line about building a sept out of traitor's bone was uttered by a character known as Sir Grey, as opposed to Lord Tully, which we see in the HBO series. Back in King's Landing, Alicent and Helaena are found in Maegor's tunnels, being re-imprisoned in their rooms, their escape plan having been foiled. Meanwhile, in the small council, Daemon tells Rhaenyra of the deaths of Sir Luther and the other Gold Cloaks, in which he found at the climax of the previous episode, episode 5, as Ormond is looking to continue to sow chaos and distrust in the city. Daemon, in a rage and anger, wants to fly to Tumbleton and burn them immediately. Daemon arguing this is what Aegon the Conqueror would do, Aegon burning thousands in order to solidify his rule. but Rhaenyra refuses, as she doesn't believe this is what her father Viserys would do, Alan agreeing with the queen, saying they should let the army handle this situation, as Ormond essentially has the people of Tumbleton held hostage. Rhaenyra deciding to, in her words, send knives, aka assassins, to repay the problem in Tumbleton. Rhaenyra then asking Alan to petition his father Corlys for Valyrian men to reinforce the city guard, the Goldcloaks, as the Goldcloak numbers are continuing to grow thin. The council is then interrupted by a host of Baratheon men, not including Lord Baratheon himself, the Lord of the Stormwind sending these men in his place to swear their loyalty. But Lord Boros can do nothing besides this, as apparently he is currently fighting the Vulture King in the mountains. This being specifically the third Vulture King, a rebel of Dornish descent that was active during the Dance of the Dragons. Rhaenyra being angered by Lord Baratheon's decision to focus on what is a relatively small annoyance, again in this Dornish bandit, as opposed to the Targaryen civil war that is causing chaos within the realm. Now, it's very obvious that Lord Baratheon and his men are sitting out the war between the Blacks and the Greens, refusing to send envoys when summoned by Ormond, which we saw in the previous episode, and sending this only kind of symbolic envoy to Rhaenyra. Boros using the Vulture King as an excuse to not have his men take part in the actual fighting. Loras Baratheon being completely willing to sit on the sidelines to sit on the fence to see which Targaryen household ultimately emerges victorious. The Baratheons we know from all of the Game of Thrones media, most notably what we saw in Game of Thrones with Robert's Rebellion, as well as the character Lionel Baratheon in Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, are very much consistently opposed to Targaryen rule, really since the days of Aegon's conquest. So not only is this in line with the story in Fire and Blood, it is also in line with the Baratheon characters as a whole, the Baratheon household as a whole, to not really provide aid to their Targaryen rulers. Meanwhile, outside of Tumbleton, Hugh the Hammer relieves Ulf the White from his duties overseeing the town. Ulf, we see, is still lamenting his new life as a dragon rider, as he feels like his life hasn't truly actually improved, and he hates feeling like his movements are completely controlled by the Queen. Back in King's Landing, Rhaenyra then speaks with Alicent, Rhaenyra having to further restrict the movements of her and her daughter after their failed escape attempt. Alicent desperately pleads with her former friend, as Helena's depression has only continued to grow worse, and not allowing her to go outside the castle into the Godswood will only worsen this. Alicent then coming clean that Helaena is in fact pregnant, this forcing Rhaenyra to double down, as she cannot allow Helaena to wander the castle or the castle grounds so that people could potentially see that she is pregnant. After this conversation, Rhaenyra leaves, asking Mysaria if she knew anything about Helaena being pregnant, Mysaria then point-blank lying to Rhaenyra, saying she didn't actually know this. As if we remember in the previous episode, Mysaria made a deal with Alicent for a Hightower favor in the future. Mysaria then needs to clean up some loose ends, as she has one of the Goldcloaks take out her spy, who reported to her about the Maester visiting Alicent in the first place. Down in the city, Daemon is speaking with the other Goldcloaks, wanting to rally them together. However, we see that many of these men are in fact turning in their cloaks. They are quitting. After so many of the deaths of their comrades, these men feel like their lives are in imminent danger, and they have their families to think about. As we see that the situation in King's Landing is growing worse and worse by the day. The Goldcloaks, the only thing that really holds the city together, that actually holds Rhaenyra's rule in place, are slowly being whittled away, and they are no closer to finding where the source of these assassins actually are. We then watch Alan, meanwhile, meet with his father Corlys, as we see that Corlys and his men have succeeded in dealing with many of the Triarchy raiders. Alan asking Lord Velaryon to send more forces to the city to bolster the Goldcloaks. Corlys being opposed to this idea, as he feels like the Queen is still continuing to ask too much of him, to take advantage of him. We then flash over to Aegon, who we see is with Larys and Tyland. Tyland burying the body of the man that Aegon killed, again in the previous episode. Tyland wanting the king to come to Casterly Rock, the home seat of the Lannisters, while Larys has found passage to Braavos. King Aegon then asking Lord Lannister if he believes that he is a bad man. Tyland very much waffling on his answer.
I would never say that. That is, while I may not have always agreed with every course of...
What?
Tyland, we know, is basically a sycophant who wants to please the king, wants to give him the answer that he wants to hear, while Larys, on the other hand, is willing to speak his mind and tell the king the truth, Aegon deciding to go with Larys' plan and sail for Essos. Meanwhile, in the Vale, Rhaena spies Seasmoke and Moondancer, the dragons of Adam and her sister Baela. Later, we see that Rhaena is brought before Lady Arryn, who has just flung another person through the moon door, the lady chastising Rhaena for having been seen out on her dragon, as this puts them all in danger, as Rhaenyra believes that Sheepstealer's rider is dead. Rhaena having to finally accept that she has traded her family and her former life for a dragon, the thing that she has always wanted. But we see in this moment she is questioning herself, wondering if this was actually worth it. Over in Harrenhal, we see Alys is doting on Aemond after the prince saved her life from the Ironborn men in the previous episode. Aemond wants to leave the castle and then go find his dragon now that his debt is repaid to the woman. Alys, though, advises Aemond to stay until the time is right for him to ultimately re-emerge, as she is trying to manipulate and convince the prince that it is actually safer for him here. And to be fair, she makes a really good point, as the Dragon Prince is but one man without his massive dragon. We obviously know this show is very much teasing Alys being some sort of witch, possibly having a connection with the old gods and magic, and definitely with Harrenhal, a place that is very much haunted and suggested to have types of ancient magic. So the way that Alys is phrasing this here definitely puts it into question as if herself was the one who actually caused Vhagar to fly away. We know that Alys is obviously not just looking out for Aemond's best interest and his safety. She very much wants him there with her for her own reasons, but she also again makes a valid point, that Aemond is acting foolhardy and his recklessness will only lead to his death, which will benefit no one. As currently Rhaenyra has 6 dragons to his 1. Even if his dragon is ancient and old and massive, there's no way that he could overcome these odds. Well, at least not yet. This scene being some very subtle foreshadowing for a huge reveal we will see to come later in this episode. Over at Tumbleton, we see Gawain has arrived and is speaking with his cousin Ormond and Daeron. Ormond barely being able to stand his smell and making jokes at his expense, speculating about Gawain's sexuality. Gawain then questions what Ormond's plan is and his willingness to continue fighting, when it seems like they have very much been defeated. Ormond declaring that they actually have the advantage. They have the blacks right where they want them, and he is looking to buy time, as he wants to continue to sow distrust and chaos in King's Landing with Rhaenyra's rule, as he is sure the other great houses will flock to his side and declare their loyalty to Daeron, but we know that none have come so far. Daeron Targaryen then escorts Gawain out of the room, where we finally actually get to see Daeron's true feelings about Ormond as a person, the newly declared Targaryen king feeling like a puppet at the hands of Lord Hightower, Daeron being upset that Gawain left him with this man, Daeron the Daring knowing that it is very unlikely he will actually be king. But who else is there to protect him, as he is basically a pawn in this game and forced to go along with Ormond's schemes and plans. The boy then asking his uncle, when he was last in King's Landing, if he saw his mother Alicent, as we can very much tell that he is homesick. This leading us into a great transition where we fade over to Alicent and Helaena in their room. Helaena, we can see, is mentally not doing so well, the woman refusing to eat and falling into a deep depression. As to her shock, she sees a familiar sight. The castle Harrenhal and her son Aemon One-Eye, curled up in a cocoon of fire, a woman looking over him, this we know being Alys Rivers. This needlework is also a callback to the kind of opening sequence that we see in House of the Dragon, which uses this same kind of needle and thread motif, and depicts many of the most iconic moments that occur in the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen Civil War. Of course, we also know, and Alicent knows as well, that Helaena is a dreamer, a Targaryen dragon dreamer, the woman being blessed with the gift of prophecy, the ability to see cryptic events of the future within her dreams. Hence why basically every single Helaena scene and every single cryptic line that she utters is completely fascinating, and you have to pay attention to it, as she is constantly uttering prophecies of the future. Again, we move back to Harrenhal as we see that Aemon is preparing to take a horse and leave, but he is discovered by a stable boy that Alys quickly deals with, Aemon wondering what it is that this woman wants from him. Alys taking him back inside, where she then drops one of the craziest reveals and one of the biggest changes so far in the House of the Dragon HBO series. Alys showing the prince a clutch of 5 dragon eggs that all belong to the dragon Dreamfire, the dragon ridden by Rhaena Targaryen, now owned by Helaena Targaryen. Dreamfire, over the course of her life and over the course of the time that she was ridden by Rhaena, has given birth to many different clutches of eggs, as throughout Rhaena's life she would wander and visit on her dragon many of the lords of Westeros throughout the lands, many of these lords attempting to convince Rhaena to give them one of these eggs as a gift, but Rhaena always refused. It was said that 3 of these eggs were stolen by Alyssa Farman, of House Farman, the woman reportedly fleeing to Pentos, as many in the Game of Thrones fanbase suspect that these 3 stolen eggs are actually the eggs that Dany was gifted in Game of Thrones. After the death of Rhaena's daughter, the woman would go into a self-imposed exile in her grief, hiding herself away at Harrenhal in isolation, until she would ultimately die in 73 AC. The HBO series have been taking this plotline and expanded upon it, as we see that this is Alys Rivers' true plan, and her gift to Aemon, a potential gift of 5 dragons that would allow him to truly challenge for the Iron Throne. The woman not only offering Aemon these eggs, but offering him children, sons to potentially ride these dragons. sons that she will give him. Now we know from A Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones universe, that hatching dragons is not a proven science. Generally, a dragon egg is placed in the cradle of a Targaryen child when possible, hoping that the bond between these two would ultimately spark the hatching process. The Targaryens believing that a combination of Valyrian blood and intense heat are needed in order to hatch these eggs. However, it is also said that there were hatcheries on Dragonstone, and that the heat of the volcanoes there aided in the hatching process. Again, it's not exactly known what the actual science, the true way that dragon eggs are hatched, and as such, there are many numerous theories abound in the community on how this happens. However, we see in this scene that Aemond comments that these eggs are actually warm, even though they have sat here for 100 years and grown hard like rock, essentially fossilized, Alys stating that there is powerful magic within this ancient place, the ancient castle of Harrenhal. However, they know that they will need Targaryen children in order to hatch these eggs, thus it makes sense why Alys would want to give him these children and why Aemond would agree. This being a pretty insane change and a major addition to our story for the HBO series, but one that I am a massive fan of. Back in King's Landing, Rhaenyra hears some petitioners at her court as the mood in the city is growing dark and more sour by the day. Rhaenyra growing angry in response and overwhelmed at the commoners' words, as we watch her cut herself on the Iron Throne. Her eyes then moving upward to the stone statue of her father. As if we remember, her father Viserys' condition that ultimately led to his death all began when he cut himself on the throne. The Iron Throne cutting whoever is sitting on it is a kind of long-running theme in Game of Thrones, many people viewing this as a sign of one who was not fit to rule, if the throne were to cut you, as Rhaenyra, in anger and being overwhelmed by the petitioners, leaves the throne room. Down in Flea Bottom, we see Daemon walking the streets disguised as a normal gold cloak, the man hoping to bait out a would-be assassin, as we see that he is being followed by a blue-eyed man. Daemon managing to corner the man and disarm him as he demands answered, the blue-eyed man telling him that they have no numbers, that they are everywhere, that he and his comrades will not rest until Daeron the Daring takes his rightful place on the throne, that no matter how many people Rhaenyra burns or has killed, they will never see her as their queen. Again, it is this group of common folk, this group of normal everyday citizens, the people of the Seven Kingdoms, that are the assassins. In many ways, these are the faceless men of King's Landing. Again, an homage to the title of the episode, and an homage to the faceless men assassins. Daemon makes his way to leave when he runs into a disguised Ulf the White, Daemon in anger chastising the Dragon Seed for disobeying the Queen's order, and for his tone, as we watch Daemon strike him down in the middle of the streets for all the common folk to see. We didn't see the common girl here, who we know is working with this kind of resistant force of assassins, watching on the entire time. This action by Daemon will be having dire consequences for the future of our story. Over to Tumbleton, we see Hugh make a daring and risky decision, the man disguising himself as a traitor and entering the city to find his wife Kat. Kat looking on in shock as she believed that Hugh was dead. Hugh wants to try to take his wife away from her to give her a better life, now that he has access to a dragon, access to status, but we see that the woman does not give him the response that he was expecting. Hugh not seeing the pain and suffering that she has gone through, that she went through to try to actually get to this city on the road alone, as he was on Dragonstone chasing his destiny, chasing his glory, chasing a dragon. Hugh, we know, did this for somewhat selfish reasons, but he did also do this in order to attempt to try to provide a better life for his family. But obviously Kat doesn't see it that way. This is something that she never wanted. All she wanted was her husband to be by her side, and now she doesn't even recognize him. Inside the manor at Tumbleton, we see Gawain, Ormond, and Daeron eating together. Ormond advising Daeron on how to choose his hand of the king, telling the boy to never trust a commoner or one who has clawed their way to power. The show obviously teasing characters like Ulf and Hugh when they are referring to this type of a person, a commoner who has gained station. Ormond actually complimenting Rhaenyra, saying that her decision to make Corlys Velaryon her hand was a good one. They are interrupted by news that a Baratheon envoy has been sent to treat with King Daeron. That we then watch the Baratheon envoys enter as we see that they are covered in mud and shit. The man in the center introduces himself as Aerion Baratheon, cousin to Lord Boros, stating that they are there to declare their allegiance to King Daeron, though we see that Gawain has his suspicions. The Baratheon men asking to meet the king so they can bend the knee, as Ormond introduces them to Daeron, who is standing right there. Gawain then rushes into action, realizing that these are actually assassins sent to kill Daeron and Ormond, as they cut the men down. Gawain later stating he realized that this man was not Aerion Baratheon, as he did not fit the man's description. Back over in King's Landing, Alicent talks to Rhaenyra once again, offering her the location of Aemon in exchange for their freedom. Alicent telling Rhaenyra about Helena's condition and her dreams. Rhaenyra realizing that Helaena is a dragon dreamer like their ancestor Daenys the Dreamer, who foresaw the doom, the whole reason why the Targaryens came to Westeros and left Valyria in the first place. Rhaenyra then coming up with a rather devious scheme, as in order to make sure that Aemon doesn't flee, she needs to send someone he trusts with a blade in hand, someone like his own mother. Rhaenyra putting Alicent in an impossible, really messed up situation. Later that evening, Rhaenyra is stopped by the Grand Maester with a rider from Tumbleton bearing a message. The man presenting one of the Baratheons' coat to her with a message written on it in blood. Kick this dog, and it will bite your hand. As Rhaenyra has learned that her assassination attempt has been foiled. Ormond's words also kind of having a double meaning here, as the hand could refer to the hand of the king, as we then flash over to Corlys Velaryon, Rhaenyra's hand of the king, drinking with his men singing the song of the Bear and the Maiden Fair, a classic drinking song in Game of Thrones, a song that was said to be Robert Baratheon's favorite song, and a song with great symbolism. Corlys then declares that he has decided to actually listen to the pleas of his son Alan and send his men back to King's Landing. However, later that night, he is approached by Sir Jon Roxton and his men, who attack Corlys, as House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 6 comes to a dramatic end. The episode opens with one of several Helaena dream sequences, as we watch the Targaryen queen walk into the courtyard of the castle, coming upon a white horse attached to a wagon, as the gates open before her, the scene being flooded with light, until Helaena is suddenly awoken by the voice of her half-sister Queen Rhaenyra. Helaena, we know, is a dreamer, a Targaryen with the ability to have prophetic-like dreams, these dreams oftentimes being ambiguous readings of the future that sometimes require interpretation. Helaena later telling Rhaenyra that she dreamed of a horse, a white mare. White mares in many cultures are oftentimes symbols of renewal and freedom. The gate opening, the light shining in, all of this together with the horse is almost a symbol of Helena's freedom, a chance for her to leave her captivity. As we know that Helaena has very much longed to be free of the castle and the room in which she is being held prisoner in. Pale horses as well are sometimes symbols of death, but in the context of how this dream sequence plays out, to me it seems much more likely that it is altogether a symbol of freedom. However, we will be discussing Helena's several dream sequences at length at the end of the video in the spoilers section. Like I said, Helaena is awoken by Rhaenyra. If we remember in the previous episode, the queen sent Alicent to Harrenhal to basically assassinate her son Aemond. In return, Alicent and her daughter Helaena would then be granted their freedom. Rhaenyra asks the girl why she didn't ride into battle with Aemond. Helaena explaining that she no longer rides her dragon Dreamfire. As we know from Fire and Blood, Helena's depression after the death of Jaehaerys at the hands of Blood and Cheese made her an unreliable dragon rider, and thus she never rode her dragon again. Rhaenyra then questions Helaena about her dreams, Rhaenyra growing more and more frantic, gripping her half-sister's arm, as she demands that Helaena tell her that there has been no mistake, and that she will prevail as the gods intend. Obviously, Helaena hasn't had any dreams regarding any of the things that Rhaenyra wants to know about, the queen having grown more and more frantic and erratic at having to face the many challenges that now await her. Over at Harrenhal, we see a still injured Aemon who comes face to face with his mother, this surprising him, as she then comforts him, pulling him close as she whispers sweet words to him. The two embracing each other as she declares that she will give him sons, it being revealed that this is actually Alys Rivers, and a very clever fake out by the show, as we the audience knew that Alicent was on her way to Harrenhal, so it made sense to see her, but then they do a quick fake out, this being Alys, Aemon being shocked and confused by the things he has just seen as he storms out of the bedroom. Now this scene is very interesting as it brings up a couple of questions. Is Aemon simply hallucinating his mother onto Alys, seeing the tender mother-like care and love that Alys has for him, and then projecting his mother's image onto her, or is it something much more manipulative, more sinister, and more magical? Alys, we know, is regarded as a witch by some of those who knew her, Alys herself very much playing into this reputation whenever it suits her. So then, was this Alys using some sort of glamour or magic to appear to Aemon disguised as Alicent to further wrap him around her finger, further manipulating him, or is this all in Aemon's head? Or perhaps it's even some strange mysterious magic from the halls of Harrenhal itself. The show leaving this rather ambiguous, though I very much lean towards the side that this is all part of Alys's master manipulator plan to ultimately get what she wants from the Targaryen prince. We then watch Aemon wander the castle when he comes across his actual mother, Alicent, who has just arrived on her assassination mission. Later we see Aemon walking with his mother in Harrenhal, Alicent explaining the lie of how she got to Harrenhal, being accompanied by Sir Adrian Redford, one of Rhaenyra's Queensguards. These words from Alicent mirroring the conversation Aemon had with the quote-unquote fake Alicent he had moments earlier. Aemon stopping and gripping his mother as he looks her over, almost as if he's trying to determine if she is actually real. Aemon then meets Sir Adrian in a kind of tense scene, as we can kind of figure out that it was likely Sir Adrian who was the one that was supposed to deliver the killing blow onto the Dragon Prince. The two men then shake hands when Aemon suddenly lashes out, stabbing him in the throat with his dagger, apologizing to his mother, telling her that there are secrets here that he can trust to no stranger. This referring to the dragon eggs that Alicent revealed to him in the previous episode. As the mother and son are then interrupted by Alicent having this very confused look on her face. We then flash over to Daemon's army of Rivermen and Northmen bearing the head of Criston Cole, as they are only a day or two away from Tumbleton. Gwaine, having scouted, returns to the town, telling them what he has seen. Ormond, though, to Gwaine's surprise, isn't worried, stating that he has a piece on the board which will bring Rhaenyra to her knees. This being a kind of reference by Ormond to Savas, the chess-like game we watched Ormond and Darren play in previous episodes, this game revolving around deploying your dragon piece, the most powerful piece in the board game. And Ormond's grand plans and schemes will be revealed at the very end of this episode in the climax. We then move over to Daemon, who arrives in the Vale on Caraxes, Daemon questioning Lady Arryn on where his daughter is, as Rhaena has disobeyed her father and Lady Arryn's orders to remain hidden, riding Sheepstealer across the Vale. Lady Arryn stating that the villagers gossip of a wild girl in the mountains leaving off nettles and sheep, this being a fun little homage to the fact that Rhaena's character has been combined with the character Nettles from Fire and Blood. Now, I've discussed this numerous times in these videos, but we'll go over it real quick. Nettles was a Targaryen dragon seed, a common-born girl who was the writer of Sheepstealer in the book series. As we can see from the description of Nettles and artwork, the HBO series has even gone as far to portray Rhaena in her kind of wild-like state to that of Nettles. Nettles in the book series was rumored to be either Daemon's lover or possibly his bastard child. Personally, I'm more convinced by the bastard child theory, and it seems like the showrunners are very much kind of playing on this kind of idea, this theory, hence why they combined Rhaena's character with that of Nettles' character. Back at Tumbleton, we see that Corlys Velaryon is alive as he is eating dinner with Darren and Ormond. Ormond's trying to bring Corlys over to his side. The Lord Hightower doesn't understand why Corlys ever serves the Targaryens, especially after what happened to his wife. In his words, after seeing how they devoured one another. This referring to the death of Rhaenys at the hands of Aemond and Vhagar. Corlys obviously taking offense to this as he demands to return to his cell. Ormond then stopping him, telling him to wait as we watch him pull out a knife. It later being revealed that in this scene, Ormond removed one of Corlys' finger, the finger with the Velaryon ring. Back in King's Landing, we see Rhaenyra is stressed out in a small council meeting. Lord Manderley seems to have finally realized that he is being made a scapegoat for the city's problems as the Master of Coin, but Rhaenyra continues to ignore him. Daemon has gone missing, as we know he has left King's Landing and heading to the Vale. Lady Frey continues to pester Rhaenyra about Harrenhal, the Queen finally giving in and telling the woman that she can just have it. That she can return to the twins and lead her men to Harrenhal to occupy it, this setting up a potential standoff between Aemond and House Frey. The council is then interrupted when Adam and Baela return, informing Rhaenyra of their sighting of Sheepstealer, the dragon bearing a rider. Rhaenyra realizing that Daemon, her husband, has lied to her. She later speaks to Mysaria, as Mysaria continues to whisper in the Queen's ear and continues to drive a wedge between her and Daemon, telling the Queen that she cannot trust her husband, as they may not know his motivation as to why he lied, but they know what Daemon is capable of. We flash over to Aegon, Larys, and Lord Lannister as they ride to Maidenpole to catch a ship to Braavos. However, they discover the common folk fleeing in the opposite direction. The king learning that Lord Mutan's army marches from that direction, taking towns and hunting Tywin Lannister as he does so. As Aegon's way is now currently blocked, the king later deciding not to run, that he will make a final stand outside Rook's Rest near the body of his dragon. Tywin deciding to stay with him, while Larys goes his own way. Back in Harrenhal, we see Alys and Aemond having a very awkward conversation. Alys obviously suspecting the Queen Dowager, as she questions her about her potentially quote-unquote perilous travels from King's Landing to Harrenhal. Alicent asks her son who this woman is, Aemond describing her as a lady and a maester of sorts. Aemond telling his mother that he will be staying at Harrenhal and making this place his seat. Dragon Prince, we know, is trying to remain hidden and bide his time, so he can build his power and his family with his newly acquired dragon eggs. All he needs is children to hatch them and then ride them, children that Alys is going to give him. Aemond wanting his mother to wait with them, but Alys then pushes back, suggesting that his mother head to Oldtown, the Hightower seat. Alys later telling Aemond that his mother has come here to do him some ill or some harm. Again, Alys's witch-like powers being teased here. The woman possibly being able to see through Alicent's motivation, or she is just manipulating Aemond and she just so happens to be right. Again, though, I much more lean on the side of Alys actually having some sort of powers. We then watch Alicent head outside, taking a knife from the body of Sir Adrian, when she then spies a strange poisonous purple flower, this likely being nightshade. I believe this is nightshade, as it very much appears similar to the flower that Helaena noticed in the Godswood in King's Landing. Alicent later prepping a spiced wine for Aemon, in which she has placed said nightshade. Later we see a befuddled Aemon come stumbling into Alice's apothecary room in the castle, the effect of the nightshade having taken hold on the Dragon Prince as he then passes out. Next, we have what is, in my opinion, one of the most epic and tragic scenes in this series so far, as we watch Daemon atop Caraxes catch up with Rhaena and Sheepstealer, Caraxes harrying the larger dragon, forcing it to land, father and daughter coming face to face with one another in between their very much on-edge dragons. Daemon chastises his daughter for being so flagrant, Rhaena explaining she wants to find and kill Vhagar or die trying in the hopes of making amends for what happened to Jace. Daemon then apologizes to his daughter, knowing that he was not there for her, as the two are more similar than she realizes. Daemon, like her, did not have a dragon at a young age, and after the death of his mother, his brother Viserys very much left him alone in his own depression, as we see a very much kinder, more understanding side to Daemon. They are then interrupted, though, as they look into the air, seeing Rhaenyra atop Syrax accompanied by Adam on Sea Smoke, Rhaena running away on foot, as to fly away on her dragon would basically ensure her death. Rhaenyra and Adam land, Adam gives chase on foot, while Rhaenyra in anger chastises Daemon, Adam dragging the girl over, where it is finally revealed to Rhaenyra that the rider of Sheepstealer is in fact Rhaena, the queen finally understanding why Daemon would lie to protect her. Sheepstealer then charges forward in the chaos to protect its rider as a chaotic four-way dragon fight then breaks out, Daemon mounting Caraxes in the process, as Seasmoke and Syrax tear into the much larger wild dragon Sheepstealer. Rhaenyra then puts Rhaena atop her dragon as she takes flight alongside Adam and Seasmoke. As Caraxes and Daemon stay behind fighting on, the red worm gravely wounding the wild dragon. However, Daemon decides not to finish it off, allowing it to limp off wounded, as Rhaena has been separated from her dragon and then taken back to King's Landing, where she is imprisoned. I absolutely love this scene. It was freaking crazy. It felt like something out of a kaiju movie, having the dragons on the ground amongst our human actors fighting. It's definitely one of my favorite scenes of this season so far. Over in the throne room, Mysaria meets with the madam from Fleabottom. Mysaria, we see, is trying to kind of wield her power and influence, but the madam sees right through her. As the woman offers her some sound advice, she tells her that she will never be one of the Highborns, as to them, a whore is always a whore. Later that evening, Daemon goes to speak with Rhaenyra in her room, Rhaenyra having her handmaiden stay with her to hear the conversation, this meaning it's very likely that Mysaria will hear every word of this conversation. Daemon apologizes to Rhaenyra, the man hoping his wife can understand why he had to lie to her to protect his own daughter that he has neglected. Rhaenyra then sending Daemon away. Down in the streets, Alan receives a package. Inside of it is the finger of his father, Corlys, bearing the Valyrian ring. This again we know is teased when Ormond pulled out the knife in the scene with Corlys earlier on in the episode. We then flash over to our second Helaena dream sequence of the episode. In the dream, we see Helaena giving birth to her son Maelor in the castle, the queen then finding herself atop her dragon Dreamfire. I believe this is the first time we actually see Dreamfire on screen, and goddamn does this dragon look absolutely amazing. The scene seemingly taking place in the dragon pits of King's Landing, where Dreamfire currently resides, as Helaena watches a group of people come charging at her, and she then orders her dragon to burn them all. The dream sequence then switches as we see Helaena in a peaceful cottage in the countryside. The white horse is in the background from the horse dream sequence, and next to her is her daughter Jaehaera and her son Maelor, both children having grown older as they are surrounded by chickens. Helaena having stated in a previous episode that she wished to live a peaceful life and raise chickens. Suddenly, though, the bright scene begins to grow dark, as we see an eclipse happening in the background. Snow begins to fall around the woman as she begins to look around confused and worried, the snow blowing more and more fierce, taking up more of the screen. This being a reference to the title of the episode, Dragon in Winter. Helaena being the dragon, as we see she is surrounded by winter. This being a kind of ominous omen for things to come. Again, Helena's dreams we know are potential fragments or glimpses of the future, or even possible futures that could happen. I've seen some speculation online already that the end of this dream sequence is a reference to the long night, the foreboding winter mentioned in the Prophecy of Ice and Fire, the winter that is warned of and is an important kind of plot point in the Game of Thrones series.
It could also be a reference to something else, to future events in our story in the history of the Dance of the Dragons.
We then see Rhaenyra wake up as she goes and speaks with Mysaria. Rhaenyra chastising the woman for continuing to drive a wedge between her and her husband. However, Mysaria continues to worm her way into the queen's mind, telling her exactly what she wants to hear, as we see they continue their physical relationship. We then move over to Aegon and Tyland, who are approached by the mutant host as they plan to make their final stand in front of the massive army. Aegon drawing his sword, where he then makes one of the best speeches of the entire series. Mutant and his men looking up as they begin to back away in fear. Tyland as well turning around as a look of horror crosses his face, as behind Aegon we see the king's scarred and wounded dragon, Sunfire, the beast having not been dead after all. And just like her master, she is scarred, crippled, and broken. The king with tears in his eyes ordering the scarred golden dragon to burn all of his enemies in front of him, as the man looks on laughing maniacally. Now, this is obviously an insanely dramatic and crazy reveal, and probably was a shock for many fans out there who are only viewers of the show, but for those of us who read Fire and Blood, we might have speculated something like this would have happened. We know from Fire and Blood that Sunfire actually didn't die in its fight with Vhagar, though the Golden Dragon is left wounded and scarred. In the book, Sunfire remained in this spot outside Rook's Rest where it fell for months, staying there for some time while it healed. The dragon eventually healing enough to where it could actually return to its master's side. So while this is a change of events from the source material, I actually really loved it, and it still captured the same kind of themes and elements from the text, but just in a much more insanely dramatic way. Our final scene, though, probably gives us the biggest reveal of the entire episode, as we see Ormond Hightower and Ulf the White drinking on a hillside with one another. This not being the first time that these two characters have met. This being the piece on the board that Ormond was referring to earlier on in the episode. Again, the most important piece in Savas is the dragon, as we see that Ormond is attempting to win over a dragon and a dragon rider to his side. Ormond playing on Ulf's pride, his ego, his want for power, wealth, and money. The fact that Daemon struck him in the streets of Flea Bottom for all of those to see, embarrassing the man and wounding his pride. This, as I predicted in my previous video, would be the final straw for Ulf. Ormond then offering Driftmark, the seat of the Velaryons, to Ulf, saying that the castle will soon be without a master, this being some ominous foreshadowing for the fate of Corlys Velaryon. Ormond telling the man that they will laugh at him no more, as Ulf gives us one of the best lines of the series so far.
No. They will burn.
The episode opens in King's Landing, as Queen Rhaenyra gets some shocking news. Rhaenyra being informed that her younger half-brother King Aegon has risen from the grave, along with his dragon Sunfire. Rhaenyra having received word that the scarred king had burned Lord Mutin and his host at Rook's Rest, which obviously we saw in the climax of the previous episode. This is obviously extremely bad for Rhaenyra, as if we can remember, the queen decided to declare her brother dead when he vanished with Lord Larys. And this decision in this moment has very much come back to bite her in the ass, as now that Aegon and his dragon Sunfire have reemerged alive, they have been declared reborn and resurrected by the faith and the small folk alike. Rhaenyra is completely distraught at learning this information, the woman in tears, as she is watching her world and everything she has worked for crumble around her in mere moments. Daemon again reiterates to her that her power is in her strength, it is in her dragons like their forefathers before them. Rhaenyra, we see, finally accepts this as we watch her face darken, as she shifts away from the values and lessons that Viserys, her father, taught her, to that of the conquering Targaryens of old. This being a major character shift for Rhaenyra, as we watch her order Daemon to head out with his army and take Tumbleton, setting into motion the climax of the finale this episode, the First Battle of Tumbleton. Rhaenyra reiterating to Daemon not to make a monster out of her, this meaning to not indiscriminately kill and use his dragon to burn the town and obviously the innocents that are within. However, we shall come to see later on that despite Daemon holding back, Rhaenyra will still emerge from this entire situation as the monster and the villain. Rhaenyra is then stopped by Baela, who wishes to know if they will rescue Lord Corlys, her grandfather, after we know he was captured by Ormond. Rhaenyra, though, is proceeding with the plans for the Battle of Tumbleton, knowing that it is very possible that Corlys could die in the process. Baela, in this moment, we see has had enough, as she finally pushes back against Rhaenyra. Baela stating that if Rhaenyra would have just given Corlys what he wanted, given legitimacy to his sons Adam and Alan, much of this entire situation could have been avoided from the start. Baela's criticism is extremely accurate. Rhaenyra does use people, use them until they are no longer useful to her, and this will ultimately lead to Rhaenyra's downfall.
Meanwhile, we see Daemon head out to meet with his army at Tumbleton while Hugh watches on concerned. Hugh having been ordered to remain in King's Landing with his dragon Vermithor, but we know that his wife Cat is in Tumbleton, so this is likely not going to happen. Over in Tumbleton, we see the merchant city preparing for the upcoming battle, moving all of the common folk inside and reinforcing the walls and ramparts as best they can. Ormond is donning his armor as he reads a message sent to him from his little birds in King's Landing. Ormond telling Prince Daemon that before he can be named king, he must be made a knight, as we watch him knight him, declaring him Sir Daeron the Daring. Ormond, we know in Fire and Blood, does knight him with his Valyrian steel sword Vigilance, and does dub him Daeron the Daring. But he does so because in the book, Daeron saves Ormond and his army atop his dragon Tessarion at the Battle of Honeywine. Thus, the Daring title makes more sense in the source material. This is a slight change for the HBO series, as again, we saw no Battle of Honeywine, no Daeron coming to the rescue, but I am just glad that they actually kept this moment of Ormond knighting the prince in the show and giving him this title. We then see Ulf drinking in Tumbleton, the man being deep in his cups, referring to Rhaenyra as the Queen of Bastards. This obviously being a reference to Rhaenyra's first 3 children, and the question on who is their father. Ulf knowing that despite Rhaenyra's large army, led by Daemon and Caraxes, Daemon will ultimately not use his dragon, as Ulf knows he has been ordered by Rhaenyra not to. Ulf, on the other hand, has no restrictions, the man declaring himself Lord Ulf the White. Ulf's ego and his lust for power and respect having driven him to this point, and we will see later on in this episode that this makes him a very unreliable ally. We move over to Mysaria, who we see is approached by the castle guard along with Alinda, the woman informing Mysaria that passage has been booked for her to journey to Pentos at dusk, as her services will no longer be required by the queen. Rhaenyra in this moment casting Mysaria aside. In the castle ground, we see Helaena crying, the woman in the throes of her depression, as with her mother Alicent gone, she is now all alone. She is then taken through the courtyard where she sees a white mare with a cart attached to it, this being the same horse and cart that Helaena saw in her prophetic dream from the previous episode. As we see Mysaria is being escorted out of the castle, this horse and cart then will seemingly be Mysaria's passage out of the city, the woman telling Helaena not to trust the queen, and that Aegon has returned with his dragon. Mysaria continuing to warn her that Helena's unborn child, her son Maelor, could be used as a hostage to negotiate and hold power over her enemies. Mysaria finishing off with one final warning, that Rhaenyra will never release her. This is obviously a bit of ominous foreshadowing for the fate of Helaena, which has been teased this entire season, and ultimately will come at the climax of this episode. Over at Harrenhal, Aemon wakes up again being tormented by memories of his brother. If we remember when we left Aemon off in the previous episode, he was just poisoned by his mother Alicent. Alice using her ability with herbs and medicines to save him from the poison. Alice and Aemon then connect on how alone they are together in this world. It's in this scene that we get one of the most shocking and interesting changes, or we could say additions, to House of the Dragon from the source material, as Alice in this conversation reveals her insane origin story, that she was possibly the wife of Harrenhal, better known as Harren the Black, the man who built Harrenhal over 100 years ago. Harren the Black was once the king of the Isles and the Rivers, when the realm was actually divided into separate kingdoms. Of course, this would all change with Aegon the Conqueror, who would unite the realm together under the power of his dragons. It is written in the histories that Aegon would kill Harren and extinguish his entire line. However, according to Alice, Harren's line was not in fact extinguished this day. A single one of his sons would survive, though badly burned by dragonfire. Alice continues saying that the boy's mother did anything she could to save him, bringing maesters from across the land, but ultimately none could help him. As such, she resorted to older cures, spells, incantations, the woman treating with strange creatures that lived in the forest, but none of it could ultimately unmake what dragonfire did. When the boy finally passed, she attempted to go with him. It was then she found out she was cursed. This was the cost of her meddling with spells and things that she did not understand. The woman would live on for all time, to remain within the bounds of the Riverlands, stripped of her name and title, her castle. This then, according to Alice, is her true identity, as the once wife of Harren the Black. This would make Alice well over 100 years old. The series again continuing to play in the rumors about Alys Rivers' origins from the book Fire and Blood, as it was common belief that Alice was a sort of wood witch who wielded powers that were possibly linked to the old gods. And now this is very interesting, as Alice's age is up for question in Fire and Blood, as Fire and Blood states that she was around 40 years old, but she appeared much younger. This is actually one of the only agreed upon facts about Alice as a character, is that she appeared unusually young despite her age. Even Maester Gildan, in his History of the Dance of the Dragons, questioned who Alice truly was, and the mysterious nature around her,
Was she in truth a witch who lay with demons, bringing forth dead children as payment for the knowledge that they gave her? Was she a simple-minded slattern, as Eustace believes, a wanton who used her poisons and potions to bind men to her body and soul? Alys is one of those characters surrounded in mystery and ambiguity. As such, there is many questions about her, and about her true motives, or what and who she really is. Again, though, we need to wonder if Alys is actually telling the truth here. Is she, in fact, well over 100 years old, the former wife of Helaena the Black, cursed to live in the Riverlands forever, or is she lying? We know that Alys as a character is extremely manipulative, and we know she wants to use Aemond for her own personal ends. And we see the effect that the story she has told to Aemond has on him. It ultimately wins him to her side, the man even later in the episode declaring Alys as his betrothed. So it is possible that she is just a master manipulator who made this entire story up to play on the emotions of a traumatized young man. And personally, I love the ambiguity surrounding Alys as a character and what the HBO series has done with her character. Alys is a good representation of what I think is really cool about House of the Dragons as a series, as they are adapting the history of the Dance of the Dragons, the book Fire and Blood. This is a lot different from adapting the book series Game of Thrones. In House of the Dragons, all they have to do is hit major plot points, for example, like the Battle of the Gullet, or Aemond at Harrenhal, or the Battle of Tumbleton, for example. They are then given so much leeway to make creative changes and then fill in the gaps on what will happen between these episodes, as opposed to adapting a fleshed out book series like, again, Game of Thrones. So if I had to guess, we will likely never know if Alys is lying or telling the truth here, if she is just a very manipulative woman, or if she is in fact a magic wielder, a cursed woman, the once wife of Helaena the Black, who has lived for over 100 years. I don't think we'll ever actually know the answer in the HBO series, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Back in King's Landing, Rhaenyra meets with Helaena as the queen attempts to get her younger sister to eat. We see Helaena has been continuing to obsessively work on her embroidery, which we get a glimpse of in this scene, but we won't see it in its entirety until the very end of the episode. This conversation, as we can imagine, does not go well. Helaena sees right through Rhaenyra and what she has become, what the crown and the throne has turned her into.
This place is ugly. Yourself. Ugly.
Helaena again refusing to eat, so Rhaenyra has her guards force the food down her mouth. The Dragon Queen then emerges from the castle, a woman transform, dressed in full dragon-scale battle armor with the crown atop her head, as we watch her journey with her son Joffrey to the High Sept, as she tells the young boy about the Song of Ice and Fire, the prophecy of the prince that was promised. We will come to see later that Rhaenyra has convinced herself that she is this Targaryen prince of legend, the one who will unite and save the realm. The chaos of the queen being moved to the city allows Mysaria the chance to escape her escort. At Tumbleton, Daeron and Gawain look out at Daemon's vast army. Ormond, we see, has devised a devious plan to place children on the front lines in order to dissuade Daemon's army from attacking, and also in order to show how barbaric they should be if they would harm these children. Daeron believes that Ormond has been hiding something from him, a secret part of his plan, a piece that he has not played yet. We, the audience, know this is Ulf and his dragon, but we see that Ormond is angered when he receives news that Ulf is nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, we see Daemon arrive on his dragon, joining Lord Tully and the Winter Wolves, as they are greeted by Gawain with Corlys in tow, Gawain and Daeron having hatched a plan to try to put a stop to the upcoming battle, as Gawain offers Daemon a deal. He will give him Lord Corlys, the Hand of the Queen, and sue for peace. The Queen would rule over all of Westeros except for Old Town, which will be Daeron's domain, Daeron essentially being king of this one realm. Corlys, we see, agrees with Gawain in principle, bringing up that many of the great houses still believe that a woman cannot rule. Corlys then offers an alternate plan. Instead of Daeron being king of Old Town, Daeron should be named Lord Paramount of the Reach and Protector of the South, and then they should wed him to Rhaena, in order to fix the divide within the Targaryen household. Corlys showing his wisdom as hand in this moment, as this move would unite most of the realm and consolidate Rhaenyra's rule. However, Daemon very predictably refuses. Daemon's bloodthirsty nature and his lust for revenge meaning that there was only one option, though it is interesting to speculate what could have happened should Daemon actually seen sense and taken this very good deal. Next we have what is probably my favorite scene of this entire episode, and one of my favorite scenes of this entire season, as we see Aemond awake in Harrenhal hearing the sounds of dragon wings flapping in the air. We watch him head outside where he sees something from his nightmares, his burned and scarred older brother atop an equally burned and scarred Sunfire. Aemond being shocked to see that both of them are still alive, as he falls to his knees in disbelief.
I'm alive!
Aemon, we know throughout the season, has been tormented by visions and thoughts of his brother, as he believed that he was responsible for his death, as he begs him for forgiveness. Aemon, having truly become a changed man over the course of this season. Aegon, we know, has been waiting for this moment to take revenge on his younger brother all this time, but he is upset seeing that the man is truly repentant for what he has done. Alys then enters the scene, knife in hand. Aegon is shocked to learn that Vhagar has gone missing, let alone that this random woman is his brother's betrothed. Aegon devising a plan. They will find Vhagar and then journey to Templeton, in order to put Ormond and Daeron in their place. Together then with their dragons, they will all march on King's Landing, where he will reclaim his throne once again. Once that is done, and his elder sister Rhaenyra's head is on a spike, only then will he forgive his brother. Back at Templeton, we see the Blacks drawing up their plan to attack the main gate. Because of the children on the battlements, Lord Roderick will take his winter wolves over the walls, and open the main gate while Daemon leads the vanguard with Caraxes in tow. Daemon telling the men to do their best to take care of the town and its people for Rhaenyra's moral standing. Back in King's Landing, Rhaenyra confronts the High Septim with her soldiers in tow. However, he denies her once again, especially after the resurrection of Aegon and his dragon, the holy man believing this is a sign that the gods have indeed chosen Aegon to rule. The High Septim referring to Rhaenyra as princess. This, in Rhaenyra's eyes, names him a traitor, as we watch Alan cut the High Septim down. Yeah, there definitely won't be repercussions for these actions in Season 4. Rhaenyra then addresses the people of the city, as we see Mysaria in the crowd, the queen declaring herself the rightful ruler, Viserys' heir, stating that her rule was ordained and prophesied long before she was born. Rhaenyra referring to the prophecy her father Viserys told her about, the Song of Ice and Fire, Rhaenyra declaring herself the prince that was promised, Azor Ahai. Now, I find this scene very interesting. In this moment, we see the Grand Maester and Lord Manderley shoot each other and look, right at the point where she is speaking of an ancient evil in the north beyond the wall. This, of course, fans of Game of Thrones know refers to the White Walkers. However, this look between the two men seemingly says, what is she talking about? Has our queen gone completely mad? Prophecy, according to George R.R. Martin himself, is a tricky business. Tyrion Lannister himself stating that prophecy is like a half-trained mule. It looks as though it might be useful, but the moment you trust in it, it kicks you in the head. And we see that Rhaenyra here has fallen into this trap. Fallen into the trap of prophecy. The final 25 minutes of the Season 3 finale revolves around the Battle of Templeton, as we watch Roddy the Ruin and his Winter Wolves begin their charge, making their way up the side of the walls. All the while, we see Ormond is desperately searching for Ulf, though man learning from a soldier that Daeron and Gawain attempted to make a peace agreement with Daemon and freed Corlys in the process, this being the first of the several treasons at Templeton, a reference to the title of the episode. Hugh then arrives to the battle atop Vermithor. Hugh, we know, is supposed to be guarding King's Landing, but the man has left his post of his own volition to make sure his wife Cat would be safe in the fighting at Templeton. The Winter Wolves have managed to cut their way inside the city, as we watch Daemon lead the vanguard charge atop Caraxes. Ormond's men then send children out to stand in front of the main gate. Yes, they are actual grade A bastards. The kids all running away in fear as we watch Caraxes bathe the main gate in fire, the dragon's long wyvern head bursting through it in an absolutely dope epic scene. The chaotic battle rages throughout the town. Ulf we see is passed out drunken and asleep in a privy, Ormond chastising him and beating him, berating him, Ormond letting his true feelings known about Ulf, that he is useless baseborn scum, as he commands Ulf to get on his dragon and do his job. Daemon in the battle comes face to face with Ormond's right-hand man, Sir Roxton, each man wielding their own Valyrian steel swords, Daemon the Targaryen blade Darksister, and Roxton with his blade Orphan Maker. This fight being a little bit of fan service and fantasy booking from the show writers, as there is no record of these two characters fighting in the book, but hey, as a fan, I'm completely here for this scene. Gawain finds Daeron attempting to unchain his dragon Tessarion and then ride it into battle. The two's conversation, though, is interrupted when they hear dragon wings beating in the sky, as we watch Ulf ride out, turning his dragon onto Daemon's army, unleashing dragon fire upon the great host of men. In the battle, Roddy manages to find Ormond atop the ramparts, Roddy overwhelming the man with his great strength until Ormond manages to deliver a deep stab and cut his hand off. Roddy then returning the favor, delivering a mortal wound to Ormond when he runs his dagger, well, where the sun don't shine. Both men then looking out to the skies as they watch Ulf and his dragon turns towards Templeton. Ulf having decided that he is in this for himself at the end of the day, as we watch Silverwing unleash a bout of flame onto the two men, killing both of them as he bathes the city in fire, this being yet another one of the many treasons of Templeton. we watch a stunned Daemon look at the ruin that has befelled the city and its people, the man having failed to protect Rhaenyra's moral standing. With the city in ruins, the Hightower army destroyed, and the River army burned, Corlys finds Daemon, telling him that they now must flee. As over the wreckage of the burned town, we see Daemon pursuing Ulf atop Caraxes, with Vermithor following riderless, Hugh still being in Tumbleton, where we see he found his wife Cat dead in her home. Back in King's Landing, we see Helaena finally finishes her embroidery piece, as the former queen looked out at the window in her room. Rhaenyra returns to the castle to learn that something terrible has happened. Helaena has thrown herself from her window, the woman being impaled on a spike down below. As we finally see the finished embroidery piece she has been devoting herself to, the piece having been a depiction of her own death. Again, as I've mentioned in other videos, the opening sequence for Season 3 is obviously an homage to Helaena and her embroidery and her prophetic-like dreams. The piece we see also shows Rhaenyra atop the Iron Throne, surrounded by flames and outstretched hands, blood seemingly running down from her head. This being an ominous look at Rhaenyra's potential future in our series, as House of the Dragon Season 3 comes to a dramatic end. Overall, another amazing season of House of the Dragon. This really is the most epic series on television right now, and personally, I think Season 3 is by far my favorite season so far. Ormond Hightower is by far the standout character from this season. James Norton does an amazing job playing this character, and I love the more prominent role the showrunners gave Ormond in this story. He's such an awesome, amazing kind of villain and antagonist. The guy's this smart, scheming, absolute royal piece of shit, and he's just amazing. He is by far the best character of the season. Again, James Norton does such an amazing job. Every scene with Ormond is so freaking good. As well, this season had some of the best action scenes in the history of Game of Thrones, full stop, between the opening episode with the Battle of the Gullet, and obviously the Season 3 finale with the Battle of Tumbleton. The scale of the Battle of Tumbleton can only be described as epic. It's just amazing how above and beyond this series has gone in its production to do justice to a story like the Dance of the Dragons, a Targaryen civil war. I also loved the dragon fight scene on the ground with Sheepstealer. This is obviously all really special effects and CGI, but it was just a really cool scene, and I love that they made this happen on the ground, as how often do you get to see dragons fight each other on the ground? The relationship between Alys and Aemond was also another highlight of the season for me personally. I love what the series has done with Alys as a character, and I love their willingness to take creative liberties with her. The same as well goes with a character like Rhaena. I'm actually a really big fan of them combining Rhaena's character with the character Nettles from Fire and Blood. I think it works really well, and it actually gives Rhaena a much more prominent role in this story and makes her character way more compelling, as in Fire and Blood, Rhaena is pretty non-existent once the war actually starts. Again, overall, another absolutely banger season of this series, especially from a hardcore Game of Thrones fan, and I already can't wait to see what they do in Season 4. Too bad we're gonna have to wait like at least 2 years to finally see it. As always, guys, thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video or you learned something new, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And let me know what was your favorite episode, favorite moment from this season of House of the Dragon. Let me know in the comment section down below. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to check out all of my other House of the Dragon content, all of my breakdown videos from this season, as well as my videos breaking down A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I will link those videos on screen now. Thank you once again, guys, for watching. Stay tuned. There will be more House of the Dragons and Game of Thrones content coming on this channel in the future. As always, I hope to see you in the next one. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace, love, adu.